Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, March 11th, 2013 at 7 p.m. here at the Shaw Auditorium. And I'd like to call the meeting to order and start off with the introduction to lead items. Ms. Sandin.
Your Worship, we have to add 3 delegations for agenda item 10A, options for Nanaimo Centre Stage building interim remediation. Mr. Jeremy Banks, Mr. Dan Appel, and Mr. Jess Anderson. And add correspondence 12C, a letter from the Nanaimo Historical Society, and add agenda item 12D, correspondence from BCGEU, QPBC, Hospital Employees Union, and Health Services Sciences Association.
Move adoption of the agenda.
Oh, I have a late issue. I'm sorry.
Okay, Councillor Kipp, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd like to ask for a late delegation motion for Mr. Bill Carter regarding an issue in the harbour.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adopt the agenda.
Okay, but maybe just before we start, and thanks for that, did you want to bring the motion forward to accelerate the position for the late delegation?
Is there a place for it? Now, we don't have delegation within our points on the agenda now, so...
So if we bring it forward, Ms. Samra, what is your recommendation?
As there's no delegations with this agenda item, the first opportunity we'd have for this person to address council would be under number 15, other business.
15, okay. So
Thank you.
we'll have the delegation may want to vote for dinner. I'm not sure that. So having said that, we'll start into the motion of the agenda. Sorry, do you have a late item?
Also have late items.
Okay.
Your Worship, I would like to know just the number of people in the hall.
Am I on?
Yes, you're on.
Oh, thank you. I would like to know if, based on the number of people that have an interest in item 10A, whether Council has an appetite to move it forward to perhaps 5D as a first item.
Ms. Samra.
You may make that motion, and it will require a majority vote to move it up in the agenda items. Say that.
Thank you. I would like to make that motion then.
Okay. Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Okay. To move it forward on the motion to advance, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Do you want the vote recorded on that?
Yes.
Councillor Johnson voted in the negative. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes.
I have 2 further, Your Worship.
Okay. Have you written these down as a matter of
Yes, I have yours.
Okay.
Under 15, other business, I would like to provide a brief report on the 20 under 40 awards and a brief report on my recently received legal opinion concerning conflict.
Okay. And
So if I may, Your Worship, confirm we're moving agenda item 10A to be first on the agenda for this evening to replace 5A. And for other business, we have a delegation, a presentation on top 20 under 40, and a presentation on conflict of interest.
Correct.
I believe that's correct. And so we'll move this under, unless I'm mistaken, 10 will now be under 5D. No? Or do you want to begin at the beginning of...
I believe the motion was to make it 5A. And I would just make the following points that each of the delegations...
We'll slide down one more number. Okay. So...
There's no other amendments to the agenda. I so move the agenda as amended.
Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the motion to adopt the minutes, please. As
Move to adopt the minutes, Your Worship.
moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going straight into presentations. And the presentation, the first one which we've moved forward under Community Services is 10A, options for Nanaimo Centre Stage building interim remediation. And we have, I understand, 3 delegations. Mr. Jeremy Banks, Mr. Dan Appel, and Mr. Jess Anderson. So, Mr. Banks, are you present? Please step forward. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today to address with you my personal concerns regarding the potential building improvements at 25 Victoria Road, more commonly referred to as Nanaimo Centre Stage. Thank you, Your Worship and Council. I love this building. When CAN and Theatre BC first opened the doors to 25 Victoria Road in late 2008, I was among the people volunteering their time to improve and upgrade the interior of the building. Many of the structures inside and technical tools that are still there are part of the creation and energy that I put in there with the help of Rob Mowbray, who has become a personal friend and founding board member of the Pacific Coast Stage Company's Fringe-tastic Theatre Festival, which has happened for 2 years this past summer in Nanaimo. I fully support the need for a black box small theatre space in downtown Nanaimo. This is critical. Our Fringe Festival started doing fundraisers there. It raised money there. It pushed all that energy and momentum into creating a home for theatre that could make other theatre companies thrive, with Western Edge Theatre, with Schmooze Productions, with Pacific Coast Stage. They were our home for our first annual Fringe-tastic Theatre Festival. And we got to see that facility grow and blossom into something that the community continues to use and support today. Previous to me being here, Frank Moore, Dean Chadwick, and Barbara French have all mentioned the beautiful and fantastic assets that facility offers, such as a wonderful location, a desirable facility, tools to do theater, set construction and storage space. And as you may have noticed, these ingredients are key to creating a positive cultural future for performing arts in Nanaimo. And it's that culture that brings this topic to council over and over again. In fact, is that topic that Kamala Tang came here and spoke to you about, who was honored by Nanaimo by the Honor and Culture Award. And she stood here to talk about these same values, the same values that she expressed on the founding of Nanaimo Centre Stage. But one of the things she mentioned was the financial obstacles that sometimes come with the arts. In this particular case, we're talking about an opportunity to spend up to or more than $800,000 to improve that building for a long-term asset, which is sometimes a very difficult decision to make. But luckily, the City of Nanaimo has already created a process to assess not only the facilities that Nanaimo has to offer, but also the future for the cultural plan for the next 5 years in Nanaimo. And those cultural forums started over a year ago, managed by Bob Kuhn. And those cultural forums look to all arts communities, not just to those specifically interested in 25 Victoria Road. And they have been working to develop a plan to represent all of Nanaimo for the next 5+ years. That plan, combined with another process that's currently happening, which is a facility inventory and asset being run again by Bob Kuhn, which is an inventory of all the facilities that are available in Nanaimo, the resources that they have available, the occupancy, the desirability, and the many different uses that those spaces can already have. Lead me to believe that before any major decisions about financing Nanaimo Centre Stage, 25 Victoria Road, needs to be delayed and deferred until a later date. Those processes are expected to be done this fall, and because of the involvement of the larger community and not just those specifically invested in one specific building, I think it's appropriate to incorporate those opinions and needs into this. To make any large financial contribution to that building today or tomorrow or next month is to deny any further exploration in alternative venues, is to ignore the resources that you might possibly already have to resolve this issue. And for that reason, I ask you to consider using option B, which is to invest into a $20,000 temporary structure to continue the operation of that organization while you explore other opportunities and wait for that feedback. $800,000 is a lot of money. And it's a lot of money for a small arts organization. And it's a lot of money for a citizen of Nanaimo to consider putting into something. And to commit that much money into something that, at this stage, ignores the needs of the city as a whole and all the citizens as a part of it is perhaps irresponsible as councillors who represent this population of Nanaimo. So I ask you tonight, when you make a decision about this, to please consider a temporary solution, allowing for more time, for more opportunities, and for more advice moving forward regarding this issue. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Banks. I see no questions from council. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Now, the next delegation is Mr. Dan Appel. Mr. Appel. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Dan Appel. I live on 940 Hecate Street. And I think I can speak very briefly for the community association, the Nob Hill Community Association, who are in support of this theater and would like to see it remain in that place and continue building its audience. My own personal view, and this represents a certain amount of urban planning background, would like to see the bare minimum done to ensure that the safety of that building is ensured, ensure the safety issues are taken care of, and then to consider in the long term to replacing that building. So I would say any upgrades that would maintain the building as it is would allow it to would just be allowed to let them degrade until, in a short period, 5 years, after we've collected enough funds, we've done enough fundraising, and brought enough people on board. I think a theater there that could hold about 200 people is reasonable. It represents an audience that is bigger than the one they have now and is sustainable size for a building like that. And as was mentioned before, there is a cultural plan coming ahead. Now, I don't know what it contains, but I'm hoping that it does have some reference to the infrastructure needed to promote culture in this town. And once that plan is in place, I think we'll see a proper direction or likely a direction to pursue. And I'm hoping that you would be open to the idea of spending the least amount of money now and spending a little more money later, but just basically saving what's left of $800,000 so that it can be applied to a new building, a new structure that would better accommodate the theater that is there. That's all I have to say.
Okay, sir, before you go, we do have one question for you, and maybe more. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Appel?
Yes.
Yes. You gave two opinions tonight, I think. Yes. One was for the Nob Hill Neighborhood Association, and I didn't actually catch what that recommendation was.
Oh, sorry. They are in support of the community, the theater being there and continuing there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Pachi.
Thank you, Worship. Just for the record to Mr. Appel, this council agreed a few weeks ago in connection with the cultural strategy that we are developing to include what was referred to as emerging issues in that planning process, and that contained the art gallery, the Nanaimo Art Gallery on Commercial Street, the Port Theatre and their desires, and 25 Victoria Road. So it will be part of that.
I'm very reassured by that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bell. I see no further questions at this point. Thank you, sir. The next delegation is Mr. Jess Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Welcome, sir.
Evening, Council, City Administration, and distinguished guests. I don't usually come to city council meetings very often. I try to have something specific when I do come. I've been watching the controversy over the Performing Arts Center, and it seems to devolve into three patterns that I'm seeing. One, fix what you've already paid into, create something new somewhere else, or do a $10 million building attached to the Port Theatre. If you're having trouble choking down $800,000, I can't see the $10 million price tag for an addition to the Port Theatre flying. Okay, just
That's not one of the options tonight.
doesn't seem to make sense. That's what was quoted in the paper. I'm not fully up to date on every little detail, but that's what was thrown around in the newspaper. The Performing Arts Center. There are ways that you can drop your costs a little bit with a little bit of synergy with different groups in town. For example, you have the Home Builders Association, you have the trades programs at the university, Discovery College and Broad Shaw Community College, which have apprentices that need on-the-job experience, and they have WCB coverage, and they also have the ability to write off as contractors if they're donating materials and that towards this upgrading for the building you currently have. So I'm hoping that the council has looked at those options or is now aware that they're potentially there to use to reduce your costs. The other comment I would make is $800,000 over 5 years, basically $175,000 per year. That works out to, with the listed 87,000 people that live directly in Nanaimo, $2.50 a year from each person. That doesn't sound so unreasonable when it's put that way. Anyway, I thought I would come down and suggest that since there isn't anything from the bottom of Nickel Street to basically Southgate Mall to draw people into that area of town, and you are currently looking at developing your arts and culture district in that area, that keeping the building that you have in place and reducing your costs with some of the suggestions that I myself have made and others have made to City Council and in the newspaper, you might be able to drop your costs quite dramatically. On that, that was all I came down to ask about. The only other comment I would make was last year I asked City Council and City Administration about setting up permanent funding through your budgeting process. It's a year later, and although everyone said it was an interesting idea last year, there's nothing in your current budget. And again, a fund like that would have applied to a project like this quite handily, and that you wouldn't have needed an increase to pay for it. Anyway.
Okay, thank you, sir. I see no questions. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're going to continue on with the delegations at this point, or do you want to continue on with provide council with the short term? Do you want to see the completion of 10A?
Yes.
Okay, so the purpose is to provide council with options to deal with the short-term safety issues as well as the long-term remediation work for the building. And at this point, there are basically only three options before council. They're on page 132, and option one is to do nothing. Option two is to install walk-through scaffolding on the Nickel Street sidewalk to protect pedestrians from stucco that may be coming dislodged from the building. The scaffolding will have to be designed to protect both pedestrians and vehicles at an estimated cost of $20,000. And it does go on that this option provides a short-term solution, could be in place for a couple of years. This does not deal with the long-term issues of the building. And option three is replace the stucco cladding and the brick veneer along Nickel Street side of the building with a rain-screened exterior insulated wall system at an estimated cost of $160,000, including design and removal. So that said, we have a number of speakers, starting with Councillor Pecci.
Thank you, Worship. At this point, I wish to move option 3, which is to replace the stucco cladding and brick veneer along the Nickel Street side of the building with a rain screen exterior insulating wall system, estimated cost $160,000. And if I can find a seconder, I would like to speak to that.
Second, okay. Second.
Well, out of the 3 options, Your Worship, number 1 is obviously not a viable one. Number 2, I came to the conclusion a few days ago when we had a tour that you participated in, and Councillor Greaves and Councillor Brennan and Councillor McKay, I believe, which led me to believe that to just deal in terms of scaffolding on the backside on Nickel Street is really not an acceptable solution, in that it does not really provide the time frame that I'm looking for in order to consider other things, and it certainly would not be a very helpful addition to what we're trying to do along Nickel Street and have scaffolding up there for 2 or 3 years or whatever the time is going to be. So to me, that is not an option either. Number 3, difficult and expensive as it is, to me means, even though the staff report here states that it would be the first phase in overall remediation, I'm not looking at it that way. And I'm certainly not committing to whatever 840,000 minus 160 is for the next 5 years, because I think there are some options, altogether apart from the fact that this is being folded in with the whole cultural strategy that we are developing and that we hope to have an answer to by September. It gives me hope when I hear people like Jeremy talk to me about fundraising, possible fundraising, because that is something that we actually have been denied so far. And to me, that is a very important part of coming to a solution for this eventually. You have to be involved with that. The other thing I want to say is that there are other possibilities that I'm just starting to hear about, and I want those explored, and I want to have a look at them. $160,000 is a lot of money to pay, particularly if we do not carry on with the balance. But again, I want to repeat that I don't feel committed to paying that balance until we have something else in place that is acceptable. It is extremely important to me to make sure that the important work that happens in that building is to be continued in whatever way, shape, or place that may be. To do anything that would, and I've been quoted to say, yank the rug from under those 30 groups that use 25 Nickel Street is anathema to me, and I don't want to be part of that, because the work is important and it's getting to be more important every year. So that is my reason for supporting number 3, and for the last time I'll say I'm not committed to the rest at this point. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I absolutely concur with colleague Pecci's comments and participated in the tour the other day as well, Your Worship. And it was very obvious that the front fascia of the building is in ill repair. And it's a safety issue, of course, and it's our mandate as the owner of the building to maintain that asset to the best of our ability. I agree that $160,000 is a lot of money to spend at this point in time, but it could come in at less once the contractors get into the building and have to see what are the causes. I know that there are grants available, and the people from the center stage have 2 grants pending to assist with future efforts in the theatre, Your Worship. 30 users of the theatre, and I think we've been lobbied by all of them. There they're enjoying the use of that facility. The Nob Hill and SECA have both supported the efforts of the ongoing volunteers in that center stage, Your Worship. And I would hope that the rest of Council would support the initial $160,000 or whatever the cost may be to support those users and support the efforts of the volunteer who are trying to make it a success. They've done great work on the inside of the building, and we've been told by staff that there's no further upgrades required in the interior. So it's a lot of money, agreed, but I think it's very important that we support this initiative, particularly since we've made it part of our strategic plan and declared culture as one of our pillars of sustainability.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've got several speakers, and maybe what we'll do is go down in a row because I think to my right there's 3 more speakers. I might just quickly say that I also support option 3, and for a number of the reasons that both my colleagues, Councillor Patchy and Councillor Johnstone, mentioned. I think, to me, it's important. There are some 30 user groups that are currently using that facility. I know that Mr. Douglas Hardy from the South End Residents Association had a letter he forwarded to us, and he and his area residents are very supportive of maintaining it where it is. I know there is also some discussion about fundraising from some of the user groups, and I think that's important. I think the thing that to me that's significant is kind of a basic thing, that if we just turn the lock and shut the door and let the people go, they do not have in the short term and even in the midterm an alternate facility available. It's the only facility of its type, and yes, maybe at some point the Port Theatre may have a rehearsal hall of some type built. There may be other locations in town that have it in due course. The problem is there's people using it right now, today, and to lock them out without giving them an alternative is something I'm uncomfortable with, so I certainly will support it. And having said that, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. I, too, attended a tour of the venue a couple of days prior to the planned and scheduled one, and upon visitation and reading the staff's report, I'm not in a position to be able to support the motion that's on the floor at $160,000, and to suggest that the 30 groups would be locked out and put on the street, which quite frankly isn't accurate, and it's not factual. The interior of the building, there is not any life or health safety risks, and the $20,000 opportunity that was expressed by Mr. Banks that would give us time, opportunity, and advice when we're looking at the inventory of the cultural study and asset inventory list that Mr. Kuhn is preparing with other members of that community, I think does give us that time. And for the very same reasons that Councillor Patchy wishes to have the $160,000 expenditure is the exact same reasons why I would recommend and suggest that we not support the motion and do the minimum amount required until we have more information available to us in which to make, as everybody has stated so far in their presentation, a very significant expenditure. This will not put the people on the street. It says clearly right in our report that it has nothing to do with the interior. This is the Nickel Street side, which is the highway, and the $160,000 is not a complete envelope, all 4 sides and or roof. This is one side. This is the cost for this work that will need to be rescheduled early in 2013 for one section of the exterior work is estimated at $160,000. And that's for the stucco cladding, the brick veneer, and the brick chimney on the Nickel Street side. So for me to commit to this investment, when I know that the 30 groups will still have opportunity to do their presentations, which will give staff and council more information as we move forward into September to get this report that we're awaiting, I think makes prudent sense for us to wait till that comes back. And it certainly doesn't suggest that we won't move forward with the balance of the work. It just means it'll give us the necessary information required to make a more sound fundamental decision on whether or not we would move forward with it. So I won't be able to support the motion, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, too, am not in favor of the motion that's on the floor at the present time. No one doubts that the theater is an important one. When I hear, is it a black box theater or is it going to turn into a black hole theater, that concerns me more. Councillor Bestwick and I toured the building. We went through it when Shaw Cable was there. Location, location, location is important in any business. And our cultural plan is important to us, too. We've been doing strategic planning. We're doing governance reviews. We're doing cultural plan reviews. The scaffolding has to be put on right now. Has to be done. The exit out of that building right now is almost disgusting onto Nickel Street. If we had a fire escape mandatory out that back door right now, people would run onto Nickel Street. It's about a 6-foot sidewalk. People are shooting down them stairs. It's dangerous as anything. So put up some pipes along that road. Put up the scaffolding so the building doesn't fall. It would have to be done even if this repair was to go through. I hope part of the $160,000 that we have here on the table is part of the scaffolding, because to tear that face apart of that building, you have scaffolding. Now, I have some concerns from my background with that building, too. The building uphill from it, south of it, is a risk. It's a masonry block building that runs a story above that building on the sloped roof side. There's electrical on the Victoria Road side that's just hanging off that next door neighbor building. There's all sorts of risks involved. When I look at the back of that building, you see a crack down the southeast corner of the building running up the side of the, I hope it's only the facade, I don't know. Something tells me it might not be because the building's bulging. You tear that wall open now and that theater will be closed. They will probably find a whole bunch of things that are problematic with it. And with our cultural plan right now, I can't support this type of work thinking that it's going to be 160 on a guesstimate. Till I tear a building apart and look at it, I really don't know. I don't know what the foundation is there. I haven't gone down into the foundation of that building and looked at it personally, but I've looked through the building and know it well. It's a great little theater, but I don't want to turn it into a black hole when our cultural plan is going on. Option number 2 moves us forward. We offer them that we will keep that thing as running as simply as possible. That's by putting on the heat and fixing the pipes like we've been doing, and run through our cultural plan, because the community needs its input on all of our culture. And to tie in, once you start tearing a building apart, folks, and I have recycled a few buildings in my life, it becomes expensive. And unless it's done as a complete package, when you start piecemealing envelopes together and finishes and sidings and do one set of stucco, when you come around the corner, it's different. And that building next door is a masonry block wall built 30, 40 years ago. I'm not even certain it has steel or bond beams in it. So I find the building to be, there's an extreme number of risks for me, and I can't support tearing it open now unless we're going to promise to do the whole thing, or just for now, make it safe, hold on to the cultural plan. So I cannot support the motion on the floor. Thank you.
Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Worship. This is a tough one. You know, in our strategic plan, we have a vision, and the vision is quality of lifestyle center, which includes the culture. And Councillor Johnston mentioned that the cultural vitality is one of our 4 pillars in the strategic plan. And then following that, one of our 6 priorities is asset management. So it all falls in line. I agree with Councillor Kipp that that fire escape on Nickel Street, that will have to be addressed. There's no question about that. And I also agree with him that piecemeal isn't going to really achieve much, and it's a Band-Aid situation, or a Band-Aid that we're going to throw on. Even at $160,000, it's a Band-Aid. I'm a little disappointed that Councillor Padgey brought that motion forward, because I would like to have amended that to $800,000 over 5 years. But I don't think I'll be allowed to, because that's kind of changing the whole motion.
I think it will. But no, is the answer.
No is what?
No, you can't. It's not a friendly amendment, so.
I didn't think
So we have to stay with the motion on the floor.
Yes, I thought so. It's, so anyway, I would certainly agree with Councillor Padgey's motion. Again, I'm a little disappointed because I think it is an asset. I think we have to look after it, and I think that it'll be more than 5 or 6 or 10 years before we get something else. And I think we have to look after it. We've got the building, and so anyway, I'll certainly vote in favor of this motion, but I'm sorry to see it was this one and not the $800,000 one.
Okay, we have Councillor McKay and Councillor Brennan left. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've got 3 major points, or main points on it. One is we have to reiterate that there's nobody getting kicked out of the building should we choose any one of these options tonight. The first one is
motion on the floor is 3, remember.
Yes, but there's nobody suggesting that they're going to get locked out of the building.
No, but the motion, you were saying whether to decide on which one, and I'm saying that right now the motion on the floor is option 3.
But perhaps if it's rejected, Your Worship.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So on asset management, you know, if you bought a home for $250,000 and 3 years later somebody told you had to spend 3 times as much of that as that to fix it up, you'd probably be looking to sue somebody. Then you find out, well, wait a minute, I did do due diligence on it, and I was well aware of the problems with the building, so I guess I've got nobody to blame but myself. It was a bad investment 5 years ago, relative to the structure of the building, not the purpose. So now, every person that's come to the podium that I've suggested, would you have an interest in buying it, I've heard no, absolutely not, positively no. You couldn't get much more positive than that. So if all the users that use that building don't want to buy it, why are we making this decision? Obviously, they know that it's not a good investment either. One of the pillars one of the things in our strategic plan is that we're going to be a responsible government. Putting good money after bad is not being responsible government. The cultural plan. We all agreed that we're going to perform a very exhaustive cultural plan. It's due to come out in September. Why are we rushing into this project? Certainly, there's emergent and needs to this, but it's not anything that we need to do right now, based on the fact that we're bringing that plan out. When the VIX came to us about investing $300,000 in a portion of the investment in Bevan Park, we all agreed and we all voted on not doing that, in favor of waiting until a master plan comes out. Yet now here we are, we've got a master cultural plan coming out, a guiding document, and we want to ignore it in place of doing this project now. The other one was all kinds of people are eager to have a conversation. The Port Theatre Society have got all kinds of great ideas on how to fundraise for that big project. One of the speakers said, yes, it's a $10 million project, but they believe there's senior levels of government willing to come to the table. They believe there's commercial sponsors willing to come to the table. But if we rush ahead and do this now, we're not going to have a chance to do that. Nobody's even talked about that. Nobody's even suggested, why don't we get the groups together and have a conversation? By not investing all of this money now and going ahead with this project and committing to this project, it gives us an opportunity to have that conversation. There's some wonderful ideas out there, but we're going down a single road. We're not veering from that road. It's the only solution, and we have to do it now. I say we don't have to do it now. Give us some time. Perhaps option number 2 might be the way to go, but certainly 3 or the complete restoration is just not responsible government in my mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am supporting the motion. I think that $160,000 will be well spent on the remediation that will allow the theatre to continue on. The notion that we would put the scaffolding up and leave it at that, I think really would work against us. That's the entrance to our downtown. It's the entrance to the heart of our city. to have people come to town and look to the side and see scaffolding hanging off the side of one of the city's building is to me not very palatable. I don't think that it pays due to what an entrance of a city should look like. I think that this motion supports the small performing arts and culture community, and it also supports the neighborhood. And while some may believe that it was a bad investment at the beginning, that's simply an assertion. It's not a fact. It's certainly not a fact to me. It's not a fact to the community organizations that appreciate it greatly because of the difference and the enhancement it's made to their neighborhoods. I think it falls in place with our strategic plan. We pledged to have a vital arts and culture community, and this pays tribute to that. It's a false dichotomy to say that it's either the Port Theatre's enhancement or this. It's not. And when you make a sort of straw man argument like that, you really don't pay a lot of respect to the small arts community and the larger, more prominent arts community. They're two very vibrant communities, and both deserve the respect of council. So just in terms of the economic aspects of a vibrant arts community, I support this. In terms of the overall neighborhood health, I support this, and I think that it shows that council has a strong confidence in the arts and culture communities in our city, and that's why I'm supporting this, is because it really does grasp the foundation of the arts community and how it impacts on not just our economic development, but our neighborhood health and our overall health of the community.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am going to vote in favor of this motion. One, because I don't want to see scaffolding on the side of Nichols Street for however many months or possibly years that it does take for council to make a decision. I think, as many members of council know, a cultural plan was done in 2008, and now there's being an update of the cultural plan. And I think during this time, what Councillor McKay wants is the opportunities to have a conversation. And so during that time, we can have a conversation about possible alternatives. Is it the best place to put all of our money into this one facility, or is it best to look at a purpose-built facility? As council will remember, in December, I actually brought forward a motion asking about that we look at alternatives, but council chose not to adopt that. So if we continue to look at this and we can see, is this a decision that's long-term? And I don't know if it is, but as we're moving forward with a cultural plan, we can have the cultural community sit down and have this conversation, and then let it come to council at the end of the day and be able to say, yes, this is the best facility to put our dollars into because it's going to be a facility that works for the long term of the community, or we will say no. This is only going to be a facility that's used for the next few years while we invest in a new type of facility. So I'll be supporting it just on the premise that we can have a space for these community groups for the next few years and then make a decision as to what we do for the long term of theatre space within our city.
Okay, everyone's been heard once. Councillor Kipp, you...
Question through staff.
Sure, go ahead.
Can someone in staff tell me, is the scaffolding included for the renovation work in the 160 guesstimate?
It's included in the sense of the cost of removing the cladding, so there have to be scaffolding there to remove it.
And protecting the road, protecting the people
while the removal's being done, and
up the full height of the building too, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a protective barrier like this. Okay.
Okay, the option on the floor is option 3. It's been moved and seconded, and so we'll call a question on it. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor McKay, Councillor Beswick, and Councillor Kipp. Sorry, I'm looking around trying to get you. Sorry, opposed. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes. We'll go back into item 5, and it'll be 5A presentations, and we'll now invite Superintendent Norm MacPhail, the officer in charge RCMP, and he's ably assisted by Mike Dietrich, who is the senior staff employee from the city at the RCMP operations as well. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Pleased to be here today, staff, audience. I'd just like to present to Council the final 2 quarterly reports for 2012. And basically they describe sort of our actions in terms of the annual performance plan. And we've included, as the last dialogue with Council, a graph that sort of shows 2011 compared to 2012. So Council's annual performance priorities are crime reduction, youth, traffic, and the downtown core. Now, overall, the commanding officer for the RCMP for E-Division wanted us to address the Crime Severity Index. The Crime Severity Index is an index kept by Statistics Canada, which Maclean's Magazine and others often comment on. Our goal for 2012 was to reduce the Crime Severity Index by 5%. It was put out to all commanders to do that. So for Nanaimo, our target was 5%. Our actual result was 4.3 over the year. So we're quite pleased with that result. Now, looking at the quarters, crime reduction, crimes against persons, compared to 2011, we're talking, the time frame we're talking about is the summer, basically to the end of the year. So basically our spring, summer, fall, winter. We're showing down to 11 and 9%. Now, shown graphically, the next slide, sort of shows you that from 2011 through to the end of 2012, we've more or less remained static on that category. Moving along to crimes against persons, down 7% and down 11%. So shown graphically, next slide, more or less flatline across the board in terms of up and down in terms of crimes against property. And this excludes the downtown core. Now, prolific offender management is the next slide, and that's one of the keys to keeping the crime rate in check. Prolific offenders are something that the police officers work very closely with. It's the small cohort of criminals that are involved in a larger aspect of the crime. So a small number of people committing a large aspect of crimes. So the management of that is us in concert with health and other agencies, housing and stuff, to deal with the root causes of crime as well as crime itself. The offenders themselves, the cohort of 67, has been consistent across the board for the last couple of years. But managing that more directly seems to give us a hold on the crime rates, at least helps us control the crime rates. The other interesting aspect to crime reduction, that crime reduction piece of prolific offender management, is the province of BC embraced this as an initiative. And they spent about $1.8 million in terms of that, and Nanaimo was included in the prolific offender management. That compares to $24 million to have those people incarcerated. So an investment of $1.8 million and staff time versus incarceration at $24 million. Next slide. Violence in relationships were showing up basically from 2011 on. In 2011, the earlier stages of 2011, we incorporated a violence in relations investigator who looked at those cases very closely. So as a result of that, more offenses were identified, specifically with individuals, historically, as well with other cases. Violence in relationships is a significant priority for policing because it affects so many things. Children in the relationships, the victims of those crimes, society as a whole. So a lot of focus on that. As a result of that focus, you see an increased number in terms of violence in relationships because of the focus on it. The more reported crime, the higher the statistics. Drug enforcement overall is down, a moderate amount. If we go over to the slide on the graph, sort of flatline. Drug enforcement is the actual interdictions that the police go forward and take action. Again, it's driven by enforcement. More enforcement on the street in terms of drugs, the higher numbers of reported cases. Marijuana grow operations, quite an interesting issue right at the present time. We have marijuana licenses that are issues that allow growers to have a certain number of plants. As a result of that, interdictions or police actions in regards to that are down significantly. If someone can legally have a grow operation within a residential area or within a residence, enforcement in terms of that is down as a result of that. The other part is that we had what was called the Crime Initiative. And the Crime Initiative was federal drug enforcement within Nanaimo, working with the neighboring communities to deal with grow operations. They came into a number of these which are not reflected into the statistics. So there was a number of operations dealt with, but in terms of overall, the numbers are still down because of marijuana medical licenses, which is, I'm not taking a position on that, but what I'm saying is that's why the numbers are down in terms of the overall. And if there's questions at the end, I can answer those. So moving over to liquor violations. Now, liquor violations shows increases over the summer period, but decreases over the winter period. This relates mainly to interdictions in the downtown core, bar close time, open liquor in public, public urination, those type of offenses. So looking graphically at liquor violations, we're up a little bit over from 2011 to the present date. A little bit of a spike there, sort of quarter three. Moving on to youth, very pleased to see that youth crime is down, 31% for the summer quarter, 17% for the following. And looking at that graphically, there's a downward trend in terms of youth crime. There's a lot of effort in terms of policing and other agencies going into youth. And as I've said to this council in the past, is that our investments need to be there. Our work in policing needs to be there, increases in school liaison officers, and interacting with the youth at an earlier stage. And I think we save a lot of crime along the road if we interject at an earlier stage. Traffic moving along, non-fatal crashes over the summer down, but when you get into winter, driving conditions and that, it's showing an increase of 47%. So that's going from 58 to 85. It's up. Now that has to do with how people drive in inclement weather. It has to do with, it doesn't fortunately have to do with impaired driving as much as it had, but definitely there. And shown graphically, we're up at the end of our year in terms of crashes with injuries. Moving along to fatal crashes, unfortunately for this year, we have 2 fatal crashes, and they occurred in the last quarter of this year. The other fatal crashes in 2011 occurred at the beginning of the year, but our fatal crashes are as a result of pedestrian vehicle incidents and caused a lot of concern for the police office, so much so that we went and got reflective armbands and reflective gear, as well as headlamps and stuff for bicycles because it was such an issue. We're hoping to try to improve things because it was a dark year, a lot of rain, but people weren't wearing the clothing they could be. And of course, drivers, there's some corrective action with drivers as well. Now, fatal crashes, if you look at the tracked over the time period, it's basically 2 and then none and then 2 over the quarter. So it looks like a bit of a roller coaster ride, but I'm sure it was for the families that were involved with those fatal crashes, and our hearts go out to them. Impaired driving and immediate roadside prohibitions. I'm pleased to say that over the quarter, impaired driving is down 9% for the summer period and down 22% over the winter period. And that's for no lack of trying on the part of the traffic unit and other investigations. And when you look across at the graph, is that impaired driving is starting to decline significantly. And that's with the immediate roadside prohibition in place, all the public education that's gone on. So we're quite pleased with that. And I'm pleased to say that also when I talk about the injury crashes or the fatal crashes, they're not related to impaired driving, which is very important. Seatbelt violations were up in the summertime and were down in the wintertime in terms of active violation or active enforcement. Summertime is a better time to be out on the road and detecting. Wintertime a little more difficult for the investigators to get out there on the street because of the limited light hours, but something that they have been trying to make a priority. And if you look at the trends over the 2 years, seatbelt compliance appears to be going down or going up in terms of compliance and down in terms of enforcement. Traffic for distracted driving. Last time I was before this council, there was some comments about distracted driving. Don't feel we were doing enough with it. Over the summer quarter, there was a 57% increase in terms of the amount of enforcement that was done on distracted driving, and that's use of cell phones while driving, that type of thing. And then a 2% increase over the winter months. If you look at the distracted driving on the graph, it's, we started at 2011 when the legislation kind of comes in play. There's sort of it, and then we kind of have a lull and then an increase in terms of that at the end of our our final quarters. And it's quite important to say and to see that people are not necessarily still getting it. I still saw a few incidents tonight, although I can't pull them over in my private truck. We do try to have those conversations. We're trying to stay on top of it because it does contribute to the crashes and the injury crashes that we've experienced. Marine patrols, nothing specific, save that we had 149 contacts over the seasonal policing time period, and we'll reflect that a little bit better in the upcoming strategic plan, but it was a very successful limited time program that we had in place to sort of enhance our waterfront capabilities and our sort of being out there on the waterfront. Downtown safety, which is the fourth initiative, has to do with crimes against persons. Up in the summertime, which is not necessarily unusual to have more animation in the downtown core in the summertime, so up 12%. And crimes against persons are primarily cause disturbance type offenses, assault offenses, those type of things where the public has been impacted or individuals have been impacted, and usually related to substance abuse. And graphically looking at that over the period, we're up a bit, but not significantly, around just below 20 reported and just below 20 at the end of that time period. And then crimes against property, Q3 up 23% from 83 to 102, and then moving down in the wintertime down 8%. And looking at it graphically, pretty well up a bit, but more in terms of the summertime activity. And again, that's usually when we have more property-related offenses. These are mischief, willful damage type offenses. It would be blended with thefts from vehicles and those type of things. And that's again for the downtown core. Moving on, we have a restorative justice program, which is our alternate measures, basically in place of court. The youth attending is up 27%, so we're dealing with it other than the courts and finding that quite effective. Restorative justice occurs within a month of the infraction, as opposed to the many months that it takes to get through the court process. For the later part of the year, we're down 8%. And for adults, we're down significantly. There just hasn't been the adult offenses that have fit the criteria for a restorative justice case. They've all been fitting to go to criminal court. Victim services referrals, these would be victims of crime or persons needing information or support in terms of crime that may have influenced them. And that's down 56% for youth and down 31% over the summertime. And for adults, we're up in terms of adult referrals to victim services in the fall, and that's more in relation to domestic violence. Now, we've reserved questions for the end. I'm just going to speak a little bit about crime mapping, strategic plan implementation, and our annual policing priorities for 2013. Crime mapping is in the final stages of the public-facing crime mapping application, which is being developed in partnership with the City of Nanaimo. The application will be hosted on the City website and will allow individuals to access property crime occurrence data for the past 5+ years. Our strategic plan implementation, this process is coming to a conclusion with the resulting plan being robust and containing crucial objectives to be addressed by the Nanaimo detachment, policing stakeholders and partners over the next 3 to 5 years. Ultimately, the strategic plan appears to be tying together many existing and developing initiatives and projects to maximize the benefits for the present and for the future. Now, our strategic planning process has very much been tied directly to the City of Nanaimo strategic planning process. All of our lessons and all of our guiding is coming from there and from stakeholder input. And finally, our 2013 annual policing priorities, these will be shifting in conjunction with the recently defined strategic plan objectives. 4 main categories exist within, which is crime reduction and public safety, and to include crime prevention, youth traffic, and community engagement for public safety. Now, if there's any questions. Your Worship.
I think there are a few. Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting indeed. You know, and one thing that I noticed that normally the Marine unit from your detachment is out July to September, obviously during the summertime. But I think it was important to point out that that is not the only time that it's involved. And within the last 2 weeks, the unit went out and apprehended somebody who had been allegedly stealing from boats for some time. And so congratulations on wintertime patrols on the water as well. We have 3 questions. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Evening, Superintendent. Thank you very much, as usual. From I'm doing this from memory, but from the last time you were here, there seems to be a really good change for the better in a lot of categories that you mentioned. A couple of exceptions. Violence in relationships. Now, I know you get to deal with that after the fact. There's probably not much you can do about it. But do you have any idea why that is increased by 10%, which is considerable?
Well, Shenna Vestergaard is our investigator, and of course, the increase, and maybe I didn't capture it properly, so I apologize, has to do with more focused enforcement. So not just the in-your-face issue that you're facing, it's actually doing background and finding out, has there been other offenses? Is offender-based and victim-based? And as you look into those cases, you find additional cases, so you find additional counts. So more reported crime in terms of that. So the focus on the issue often results in more information that comes forward and more reported crime, which increases the number. So the focus for the police office is, where do we interject or intervene to set up the prevention side to keep that away? And victim services is one of the gateways, but social services is another, mental health is another, addiction management is another, economics is another. So building the group and cohort goes with that as much. So that's really what it's related to.
One follow-up, Your Worship, if I may. Increase of 47% in the last quarter of non-fatal crashes in a mild winter. How do you explain that?
We had a lot of pedestrian impacts, which non-fatal crashes means a vehicle with a pedestrian where there isn't death. Those all seem to be related to driver inattention and weather conditions in terms of the information I've received. So it's up, so we need to be out in the public as we were on distracted driving. I'm catching your message, Councillor, Your Worship.
But at the same time, you showed us that distracted driving is down in the last quarter. So it doesn't quite mesh, does it?
Well, distracted driving enforcement was up. Over the winter period, not as much. No. Good nexus,
That was down. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Superintendent, for your presentation. It's great to see that youth crime is down within our city. I was just wondering if you could explain to me and the rest of Council just what are some of the crimes that youth are committing within the city?
Pardon me?
What some of the types of crimes that youth are committing within the city?
Mainly has to do with causing disturbance, usually to do with graffiti, usually to do with theft under. General disturbances cause disturbance. That's generally what the youth crimes are. Overall, that would be the average.
And I would just follow up on that. It's great to see that you're using restorative justice, and I was just wondering what other types of programs that you may be using as alternatives to prison, in a sense.
Well, alternative justice, the only official program we use right now besides the courts is restorative justice. Now, that said, is we have other ways of interfacing with youth outside of the actual offenses, but restorative justice in partnership with John Howard Society is the one we primarily use as our referral for keeping things from the court.
Okay, thank you.
Last question, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Superintendent McPhail. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you sort of rushed over it a bit about the marijuana, the medical marijuana licenses, and the stat for illegal marijuana was down. Is there any collation?
Yeah, the collation is that in terms of, it's not clear in terms of what's criminal and what's no longer anymore in terms of a warrant to search a dwelling house. So if there's a medical marijuana license there, a person has a legal right to marijuana. One of the complications for us in terms of law enforcement is that there's also other aspects in that. So in terms of gaining entry to a residence where it's believed to be, say, possession for the purpose or producing for the purpose of trafficking, is that it's blurred by the licensing regulations. It's an issue that I'm trying to deal with at the present time because the Health Canada has made amendments for April 1st to commercialize this and take it out of residential areas. So that's for April 1st. However, there exists a number of locations within the city that have medical grows that we're concerned about the standard to which those are kept, not even necessarily in terms of enforcement, but in terms of public safety overall. So we're working closely with Health Canada and the city in terms of compliance to things like building codes, whether they're healthy situations in terms of molds and things that occur, those type of initiatives. So I don't know if I answered directly what you're after, factor, but that's sort of the gray area we're in terms of compliance is not what the police do in terms of how things are run, but in terms of law, so we're in a bit of a gray area here. So that's and resulting in terms of criminality of that, it's a gray area. So always the benefit to, non-enforcement if
I understand.
If it is gray.
Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Superintendent McPhail. I don't see any other questions now. Again, we certainly appreciate you coming forward quarterly to give us an update on things, and it sounds encouraging by and large. It's an improvement each time, and we appreciate all your efforts, and to the men and women of the RCMP and Nanaimo Detachment, our appreciation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship, councillors, staff.
Now, the next delegation is Ms. Susan Clift, Director of Engineering, Public Works, and Mr. Foy, Traffic Transportation Engineer, to provide a presentation regarding the Transportation Master Plan.
Your Worship, members of Council. The City of Nanaimo is currently developing its very first comprehensive citywide transportation plan. It's a long-range strategic plan that reflects our community's values and will inform us for the next 20 years what our transportation priorities should be. Our goal this evening is to deliver the first of two presentations that will provide Council with an update on the activities of the Transportation Advisory Committee as it relates to the transportation plan. We've now reached a major milestone in the project, and specifically all the data gathering, all of the initial consultation, the surveying, and the identification of existing conditions has been completed. We're now moving to issues and opportunities. Tonight, staff will be reporting out on the highlights of the data that we've been collecting as part of this process. This gives us a comprehensive view of our existing transportation conditions. It'll also help us identify those issues and opportunities. Urban Systems, the city's transportation consultant, will be following up in the next few weeks to report out on the results of the public engagement process and to further speak and develop issues and opportunities for walking, cycling, transit, and on our road systems, and also how they interact or interface with rail and ferry systems here in Nanaimo. Here's where we are in the process to date. The last time we were here was in October when we were launching the public surveys, and we have now finished all of that work. We've finished our discovering phase. We've established our existing conditions, and we're now moving on to the next phase. So we've completed the discovery phase. In 2008, the official community plan, Plan Nanaimo, identified as Nanaimo's population grew, its transportation system would become more important and more complex. It also signaled that a shift to more sustainable mode choices was desired. Plan Nanaimo also laid out the foundation to link land use planning and transportation planning. Transportation and mobility matters were also identified as important in Nanaimo's strategic plan. And it also specifically intended that it be a sustainable plan. Nanaimo's challenge will be to move from this mode split, which is clearly automobile dominated, to this mode split, which is clearly more balanced and emphasizes transit, biking, and walking much more. Now, I'm going to be joined by Mr. Gordon Foy, who is the city's transportation and traffic engineer, who will present the highlights of the information we've been gathering to this stage in the project.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this presentation is to provide some context for what we've been doing over the last year in terms of collecting information to provide a baseline and to provide some the fundamental foundation of the transportation planning process, and also to provide context for a presentation followed up by our transportation consultant in the coming weeks, as Susan mentioned. One of the first things in a transportation plan that we look at is not so much trips or travel, but actually where people live and where people work. Because at a fundamental level, where we travel and how we travel and when we travel is largely determined by where we live, where we work, where we shop, and what services we're trying to access. In the two maps that are presented on the screen, you see that the city's population on the left side follows a historic travel pattern where downtown and the neighborhoods surrounding downtown are denser, with some concentration around areas such as Country Club, around North Nanaimo Centre, Longwood Station, and then eventually surrounding the Woodgrove area. And that the remainder of the city is relatively either undeveloped or developed at a sort of lower density, suburban type format. Conversely, you also see employment density on the map to the right, which is really a proxy for activities, services, where people are going to school, where people are working, and together they give us a strong indication of where trips within the city are starting and ending, and really provide us some initial context of where travel is occurring. What's not apparent in that map is just what's happened over the last 10 years. It's not necessarily as important where our existing population is, but where people are seeing change, because this is the pressure, this is the change that will exert pressure on our transportation system. We looked back 10 years and we looked at what happened between 2001 and 2011. Where did growth occur? Where did new residents of the city and where did new households form? And what we found is 60% of population growth effectively occurred in 4 neighborhoods surrounding Woodgrove and in the south of Harewood and Cinnabar Valley. So in terms of where did we see changes in travel behavior in the last 10 years, these areas were definitely the dominant areas. The other interesting fact is some neighborhoods where housing stock has remained relatively stable, i.e. there hasn't been a lot of development, we've actually seen population fall. And that comes down to a long-term trend towards smaller households as people lose kids or maybe a 2-person household becomes a 1-person household. There's a trend over time, if no new housing units are added to a neighborhood, to see the total population fall and thus the total number of trips also. When we think about the plan is about the future. So this chart shows what the expected population growth is across the city over the next 30 years. 38,000 residents are expected by 2041. That's about the same number of residents that we saw in the last 30 years back to 1981. But the spatial pattern of that growth is shifting a bit. Well, the north of the city has been quite dominant in growth in recent history. Availability of land is becoming more scarce, and a slow but gradual shift towards the south as available land is constrained, and areas such as Sandstone, as described in the OCP, start to accept more and more of the city's overall development. And correspondingly, where expected growth in travel demand will occur. So when we came to last time, I believe in October of 2012, we talked about the household travel survey, and I believe some of you may have participated in it. This was a survey of 1,500 households across Nanaimo, asking people to record all of their travel within the household by all household members over a 24-hour period. The results of that survey indicate that we make about 250,000 trips a day on a typical weekday. That each household makes about 7 trips, and each person makes about 3. If you take the average trip length of just under 6 kilometers, it works out to 1.5 million kilometers of travel per day, and you could go to the moon and back and do that twice, and that would be how much travel we accommodate on our transportation network on a daily basis on a weekday. That's a lot of travel, and it really underscores how important our transportation network is and how much movement and mobility it facilitates. And this is across all modes: walking, biking, cycling, transit, and by car. How people move is definitely dominated by cars. So about 88% of trips over a 24-hour period are by vehicle, 2.5% by transit, a little more than 1% by bike, and 8.5% or so by walking. So we are, in a way, relatively car captive, and part of this plan is to come up with a strategy over the next 30 years to shift to a more balanced mix of transportation. The time of travel also counts. We have some very distinct peaks in our travel behavior. AM peak is associated with going to school and going to work. It's very sharp, and it's very specific. People are heading to work. They often don't diverge. Their trips are very uniform and repetitive. Later in the afternoon, people are making all sorts of trips. They might be coming home from work, but they also might go to the groceries or the doctor or many other things in between. And in fact, we sort of see a double peak where people come from home, back from school earlier, and then eventually sort of return from work in the afternoon right around 5 to 5:30. During that 5 to 5:30 period, we see about 20 or 14,000 trips hop onto our network in half an hour. So it gives you a sense of scale of how many people are trying to move around. The other thing is that depending on which mode you're talking about, the nature of the trips, especially in how long they are, changes a lot. Walking, of course, is shorter, with 90% of trips being under 2 kilometers. And cycling is about twice as long, with 87% being less than 4 kilometers. But interestingly enough, we have a lot of car trips that are well within the range of walking or biking. So there's an opportunity here, and something that we will for sure explore further through the plan, about the ability, can we shift some of those short car trips into walking and biking? We also looked at travel time. So it's an interesting conversation that often comes up, which is the Parkway is it really much faster than Island Highway, and how much faster? And the information that we did collect was, yes, it is, by about 10 minutes if you're traveling from one end of the city to the other. And Bowen Road's a little bit slower than Island Highway. But the interesting sort of sidebar to that is that for many trips that are sort of within the city, the time it takes to go out to the Parkway, drive along the Parkway, and come back just doesn't make it worthwhile to make that route change. And thus, we believe that Island Highway will continue to be a major corridor within the city for a long time, well into our future, even if the Parkway continues to grow in absolute numbers. Where did walking and biking occur, and transit use? It really was concentrated around our traditional core neighborhoods, basically from Country Club South into Harewood, and then, interestingly, a little bit of concentration around Woodgrove Mall. Some of the higher density neighborhoods that are starting to form on the peripheral of Woodgrove Center are starting to see more walking and biking and transit trips. So it shows, or it indicates that the landform and the character of neighborhoods has a strong influence on what type of travel behavior the people living in them undertake. So when we just look at the data, and this is not all our observation and opportunities, because this really is just looking at these particular sort of data sets, there is a couple of sort of observations that we've noted. One is that we know that the city is going to grow. We know that the city is going to get older in age. And we have an opportunity right now to develop a plan to anticipate and start to head off issues that may occur over the next 20 to 30 years. And that's really what this plan is about, as well as trying to meet some of the goals that are in our OCP and strategic plan. Different neighborhoods, different solutions. I think from some of the mapping, you see that when we put the average trip mode split, it's not that we're not a uniform city. Many neighborhoods are behaving different age groups are behaving differently, and therefore the plan will likely have to have a range of solutions, maybe even for the same issue, to try to address all of those different variables. We do travel a lot by car, but there are many short trips that have an opportunity for us to maybe not take that car for all of them. And the flip side of that is many of us need to travel long distances to meet our daily needs and effectively are car captive. And if there's opportunities over the next 20 years to make strategic choices about land use and the character and services that are available in our neighborhoods, there might be the ability for some individuals to either shorten those trips or perhaps shift to other modes. So I hope that and we have next steps, sorry. Susan, do you want to take this? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
You'll notice that most of the presentation tonight was information, was data, and we just gave you a taste or a touch of what some of the issues and opportunities were. The next presentation by Urban Systems in a few weeks will go much deeper into the issues, and as because that's where they are moving now. They are finished. We finished the first round of public consultation, and they are now looking at developing with the Transportation Advisory Committee a first draft of vision, goals, objectives, and targets. So there's some more work to be done there with the Transportation Advisory Committee. But we thought this information was interesting enough to present to Council, and certainly when Urban Systems comes back, you will have this information already and be able to move forward and work with them on the next steps. So that's it for now, and we're happy to ask questions.
Okay, the first question I see, thank you, Ms. Clift. Before you go, we have Councillor Patchy.
Thank you. Actually, would you mind if I ask Mr. Foy a question?
He'll probably know more than I.
All right. I'm interested in your second to last slide dealt with different solutions for different neighborhoods. Now, I noticed in your density graphs that the neighborhood that I live in, Departure Bay, is well on the decline by the looks of it, whereas the south end is coming up. So what solution would you have for traffic issues in Departure Bay, say, as opposed to the south end because of the different densities?
Well, I wouldn't want to sort of be presumptuous about what solutions we come out of the plan with, but my general comment would be is that if some neighborhoods it's not viable to necessarily ask people to walk and bike, in some situations it may be too far. There's a couple things that can be done. Either services can strategically be tried to be relocated such that they're closer so people can walk and bike to those trips. And I know in Departure Bay's case, there was historically a grocery store, I believe, on the beach, and many individuals from that neighborhood have commented to me that they miss that sort of type of asset in their community, and that would have allowed them to make some trips differently. The other strategy is to just try and reduce the impact of those vehicle trips by shortening them and not necessarily shifting to other modes.
Thank you. Okay, I see no further questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Ms. Clift. Now, the next delegation, Mr. Brian Clements, Director of Finance, and Ms. T. Hartley, Director of Human Resources and Organizational Planning, to provide a presentation regarding the effect of wages and benefits on the 2013-2017 financial plan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm actually not going to do very much talking today. I'm going to turn that over to Ms. Hartley to provide the presentation. So I'll just remind you this is part of our ongoing series of presentations to Council on background information for the budget, and we're not looking for any particular decisions tonight, but any debate or discussion on the topic is certainly encouraged, and we're willing to answer any questions you have when the presentation is done. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Hartley right away.
Ms. Hartley? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Just maybe starting with a bit of a preamble. Of course, wages and benefits are, as they relate to the budget, are certainly appropriate for public discussion. We just have to be careful when we're discussing these that we don't go into any in-camera type things where there might be harmful to the employer or to the employees. So just to keep that in mind as we're going through this. So this is the agenda, the things that we're going to cover. And just starting with an overview, you can see that the wage and benefit costs are about 46% of the city's budget, operating budget for 2013. That doesn't include wages for RCMP, who of course aren't our employees, but we do contribute a large amount to that contract. So you see that separately as another 16.7%. And that's not unusual high amount of the 46% for wages and benefits. We're a very service-oriented organization, and so it's a higher than some. One of the big drivers of wages and benefits, of course, is the number of employees, or full-time equivalents. FTEs is another word for that. And that's what you can see here is for each employee group from 2008 to 2013. Most of these charts will show from 2008 because it's a 5-year period, and because I've been here almost that long, I can actually know some of the information about what happened. So you can see the RCMP there at 13.8% growth. They're not our employees, but as we said, we do contribute to their wages. And that also drives some of the CUPE increases in FTEs, because as we get new RCMP members, we also need to support them through municipal employees. IFF, you can see an 18.5% increase over that time period. That's mostly due to the opening of Fire Hall number 4. And exempt staff, you can see 0% increase. That does vary, did vary or fluctuate through that time period. But whereas we would hire some new positions like a communications manager and a parking manager, at the same time we eliminated a full-time position for a deputy city manager and a risk manager. Here's the total gross payroll for 2008 to 2012. Now, so there's some oddities here that I should point out. You can see in 2009, it looks quite different than 2008. There's quite a big increase. And then 2010, it looks like it's flattened again. Well, that's because in 2009, there was 27 pay periods. So there was an extra pay period that year, and that accounts for some of that. Also for IFF, that was a year the contract was settled, and so there was some retroactive pay. The other thing to point out with IFF is it does not include wage increases for 2010, 2011, and 2012. That contract is not settled. So you may think, well, then, geez, that's going to even be higher than the 31.9%, and it probably will. However, 2008, there was an unsettled contract, too, so when you compare those, there's just those anomalies. Here's wage increases for the 3 employee groups, 2008 to 2012. It includes CUPE in blue, that's CUPE level 11, so that's across the board increases, but in that case it's just level 11 and above. IFF is red, naturally, and exempt is in green. So you can see there what those increases are through the bars. The projections for IFF are in there for 2010 and 2011 because we have a pretty good idea of what those are going to be based on Vancouver interest arbitration. We didn't put in an amount for 2012, but you can see the average just on the column to the left of 2012, the averages for the 3 employee groups, with IFF having a 3.9% average over that period for the 4 years, exempt 2.2, and CUPE level 11, 3.1. That would be just slightly lower if it was didn't include the band 11 people. Here's the average wages for each of the 3 employee groups. In this case, we projected again the 2010, 2011 increases for IFF. This is base rates, not overtime, but with IFF, they get stat pay on top of their pay rather than getting premium pay on the day of a statutory holiday. Therefore, there's a little bit elevated for that reason. For comparison purposes, we put in the 2% increase that CUPE got for 2012 just to see what that would look like. And as you can see, IFF there is closing in on the average wage for exempt. So there's some wage studies out there. Canadian Federation of Independent Business does a Wage Watch report every few years. In this case, in 2008, they compared private sector and public sector wages using the 2006 census data. And they said that there was a wage advantage in the public sector of between 8% and 17%, focused on the federal, provincial, and municipal governments, with the municipal government said to have a wage advantage of 11.2%. There's been multiple studies since 2008 that criticize the methodology used in the CFIB report. One of those critiques is Treasury Board Secretariat, for example. So what they say is that really CFIB isn't comparing apples with apples. They take a subset of the census data and leave out sort of the private sector high wage occupations, but do include the low wage occupations in the private sector. The jobs aren't matched to each other, so there's no accounting for knowledge, experience, and skills in those comparisons. And they use employers with size of 10 or less is included in that, whereas most public sector or municipal organizations are much larger. Another criticism is that it uses the median versus the mean, or the mean being the average, and therefore it leaves out the high-paying positions in the private sector. There's more extremes, where in the public sector the pay is more closely together. And finally, the criticism is that really it just reflects that there's a much higher degree of unionization in the public sector than in the private sector, and that accounts for any differences. CUPE did a report, didn't get quite as much publicity. This was in 2011. They commissioned an independent firm to do a study for them. They found that there was a pay advantage in the public sector of about 0.5%. And they said that that was due to a more gender-neutral pay system, with women being paid 4.5% more in the public sector and men being paid 5.3% less. The study concluded that the largest wage premiums are for jobs that pay relatively low, and they looked at cleaners and receptionists and said, well, those jobs are paid better, much better in the public sector. But yet, other jobs that are paid relatively high, such as accountants and computer technicians, they actually have a penalty by working in the public sector. So the only other comment I'd make on these wage studies, they obviously come from two different frames of reference, with Canadian Federation of Independent Business more right-wing and CUPE obviously more left-wing. And this is really only to say, when you see the headlines, don't believe everything you read, because there is different methodologies being used here, and there's not always reliable and valid studies. So now benefits. These are the benefit costs as a percentage of payroll. Again, there's unresolved IFF collective agreement for 2012 payroll, but similarly, there's unresolved benefit issues potentially in those contracts. Percentage of payroll for benefits, about 15 to 20%, is quite the norm. Here's now the benefit costs changes over time from 2008 to 2012. Now, the total figure there actually includes a surplus of about $230,000, which was left over. We had a credit with our benefits provider at the end of the year, and that credit will be applied in 2013. So some of this benefit cost increase is due to more staff. So again, IFF had some increased staff over that period of time, and of course the benefits costs will be higher as a result of that. When you look at it on a per person basis, the increase isn't quite that high. It's more like 30%. And there's a lot of reasons for that, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later, what this sort of benefit inflation consists of. Here's benefit costs by type based on 2012. Most of it, you can see, is due to the pension plan, the employer contributions to the pension plan. Also, higher cost items are extended health, dental, and a medical services plan. So just going to talk a little bit about the municipal pension plan. It's a defined benefit pension plan, meaning that employees who get the benefit, who retire, get a base monthly amount every year, or sorry, every month. There's others besides municipalities in the pension plan in the MPP, and that includes school boards and healthcare employees as well. The employer pays 9.86% regardless of the salary of the employee, so that's 9.86% of salary, where the employee pays a differential amount depending on how much they earn. The more you earn, the more you pay in terms of your percentage. And so up to the yearly maximum pensionable earnings, which is the YMPE, an employee would pay 7.8% of their salary. If it's over the YMPE, then they'd pay 9.3%. And just here's an example here. So taking the average salary for CUPE employee, the employer would pay $60,145 times 9.86% for a total of almost $6,000 for the year, where the employee pays 7.8% on the first $51,100 for this year, and the 9.3% on the remaining amount for approximately $5,000. So the employee is paying, and in fact, when an employee becomes permanent at the city, they are required to contribute to the pension plan. Here's sick leave costs as a percentage of payroll. So you can see as a percentage of payroll, CUPE and IFF is around 5%. We're exempt, it's about 1.5%. Now, these aren't actual costs. I should emphasize that. These are, in some cases, actual costs where an employee has to be replaced. But in most cases, it's lost productivity. Somebody's not at work, not doing their work, and so it's lost productivity. So there's a cost to that. The other thing I would point out is that for IFF, because of the nature of their work, they need to be very physically fit to do that work. And CUPE, in some cases, some of those outside positions are similar. And that is especially important when you see this slide, where you see the costs over time. And again, a huge increase, it looks like, from IFF for 65% increase from 2008 to 2012, again in actual and soft costs. The biggest increase there, it looks like, occurred about 2011 and 2012. And so what I need to emphasize here is that IFF do not have a long-term disability plan, which means that if someone gets significantly ill for a long period of time, they are using sick leave rather than long-term disability where you would pay a premium into it. And that is the case with, there were 3 or 4 IFF members who had significant illnesses starting in 2011, and that accounts for most of that increase. So just going in now to some challenges to controlling costs of wages and benefits. First of all, of course, Council just doesn't set wages and benefits by fiat. There is a collective bargaining agreement for both CUPE and IFF, and negotiations are about compromising. In the case of IFF, if an agreement isn't settled, there's something called a Fire and Police Collective Bargaining Act, and that requires that matters in dispute on collective bargaining are settled through interest arbitration. An interest arbitrator puts very little stock in ability to pay. What's most important is a parity with the traditional comparator, and the traditional comparator in most of BC for firefighter locals is Vancouver. And so that's why you'll see that the percentages used for 2010 and 2011 really reflect what happened in Vancouver. Exempt employees, well, there are employment contracts, there are letters of appointment that give the terms and conditions of employment, and common law principles that say if there's a material change to a contract of employment, that reasonable notice must be given. even if all of that collective bargaining and employment contract issues weren't there, of course the city needs to be able to pay competitively if we're to attract and retain people. This is especially important now that we have this workforce demographic that's a lot of people who are retiring. For example, 25 to 30% of the union employees at the city are eligible for an unreduced pension in the next 5 years. So it is important that we're able to attract skilled labor. And it's important to pay equitably to ensure our employees are feeling productive and feel fairly paid. Another thing to consider is the benefit and sick leave costs are impacted by workforce demographics. For example, with benefits, we do have an aging workforce. The average age is 46. That's for overall the three groups. Management, it's higher. And IFF, it's lower. But in terms of what the impact that has, there's more prescription drugs that are used as people get older, and they're more expensive prescription drugs. Biologic drugs are used, for example, age-related conditions like arthritis and cancer, very high cost for the drugs, prescription drugs. Also, there is, in terms of sick leave, as people age, of course, they're more prone to a lot more significant medical conditions, and they have a longer recovery time, so that impacts the sick leave as well. Another challenge is the collective agreement language in both the CUPE and IFF collective agreements have something called a sick leave bank, whereas if a member runs out of sick leave time, say they get an annual amount each year, they can draw upon this sick leave bank. In the case of CUPE collective agreement language, CUPE actually adjudicates the sick leave, so they determine who gets this sick leave bank. So the employer does not have the control over that. Employee attitudes can be a challenge. In some cases, employees may feel that, well, I have the benefit, so I can use it. And what opportunities do we have or actions to control costs? Well, collective bargaining is always an opportunity to get trade-offs and flexibility and save some costs while at the same time providing some kind of equitable wage. Of course, to make any real significant change, Council would need to be willing to let collective agreements go to impasse. There are things we can do that are unilateral, and we have done. So we've marketed our benefits program and our benefits consulting in the last couple of years. Together, those two things have saved us $150,000 per year for 2 years at least. We've also applied for and received the certificate of recognition from the WorkSafe BC, and that gives us a rebate of about $70,000 per year, and we'll continue to get that while we maintain that certificate of recognition. We have a very sophisticated health and safety program designed to prevent workplace injuries, and if we can do that, of course, that's important for people, keeping people at work, and also for saving in WCB premiums. We have a good wellness program to support employees in maintaining a good health and a healthy lifestyle. In the fall of last year, we've revamped our attendance management program. That kind of program is about identifying high levels of absenteeism and taking steps to deal with situations where that's the case, whether through support or through other monitoring and progressive action. We are having a disability management review right now of our program and seeking to make changes for better medical management of conditions, helping people get the proper treatment and get back to work as soon as possible. And then with CUPE in 2009, we developed a return to work and accommodation program that is getting good use. 4 people were permanently accommodated last year and another 14 return to work situations. So this is just getting people back to productive work as safe and quickly as possible. So are these having any impact? Well, it's too early to say based on this, but this is just some recent metrics on short-term sick leave, and you can see that each of the employee groups has been a decline in sick leave hours used. Whether this is a trend or not is, as I said, too early to say, but it's going in the right direction. That's it.
No. So, yes, we do have some questions. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the things you brought up, and this question's to staff, was that we continue to compare ourselves to Vancouver. So I was just wondering if you could explain why we would compare ourselves to Vancouver instead of a similar-sized municipality.
I think, in fairness, are we not dealing with IAFF in particular?
Yes, Your Worship. This is with IFF. The interest arbitrator is what happens if you are unable to settle a collective agreement with an IFF or a police, for example, if we had municipal police. Then the matter goes to interest arbitrator. An interest arbitrator has a set of rules that they apply. And the predominant one that they apply is what has been the historical comparator for that group. And in the case of all of BC, local firefighters, Vancouver is the comparator. So we really don't have a lot of control. It's not by choice that we compare to Vancouver. And in fact, sometimes when other municipalities do better in terms of wages, then IFF would like us to compare to them. However, we stick with Vancouver.
Just a follow-up to that, is there a reason why they choose to use Vancouver then?
Your Worship, I might see if someone else knows some more history. I'm just 5 years here, so.
I think it's just primarily that it's the largest and sets the wage level for most of the province because it is the largest. And it's not just the firefighters where the wages are similar across the province. In virtually all the healthcare fields, people make the same pay in nursing or pharmacy or physiotherapy or medicine everywhere you work in BC. So it's not an unusual concept.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hartley. There's lots of stuff here and lots of questions, but I'll just ask you two for now. The QP wage study that you referred to, which had women paid 4.5% higher and men 5.3% less than the private sector, are those numbers strictly applicable to Nanaimo, or is that just a whole QP thing?
That was a Canadian study.
It's a Canadian study. Okay, thank you for that. Absenteeism, is that a problem in this corporation?
It is something that we need to work on and always pay attention to and focus on, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Ms. Hartley. The lost proactivity, the sick leave, is concerning. Have we done comparisons with other municipalities? Are we lower than average, or?
Your Worship, it is very difficult to compare with other municipalities because of the different components that people put in sick leave. So what we're talking about here is short-term sick leave. Others may be including LTD when they do their metrics. So it is very difficult to compare. However, there was an absence study done in the last couple of years that put, for a unionized employer, 12.5%, I believe, was the average daily, average yearly days absent. For our exempt group and IFF group, we're slightly below that. For our QP group, we're slightly above.
Thank you.
Ms. Hartley, just one question. The benefits that we're accruing through for protective services, police, fire, and so on, that is, what percentage of the budget would that be? Approximately 3%?
Your Worship, it looked like the benefits for the three groups, they were around 15% of payroll. For the of the total budget, the total budget was 46% wages and benefit. Is that what you're?
Well, no, I just wondered what the actual out of our total budget of what 175 million. What kind of a percentage are we looking at? And
I'll turn that over to Mr. Clemens.
Math in your head? 15%. So it's about 3%. Your Worship, I think your estimate of 3% is approximately correct.
Yeah. So, I guess where I'm going with that is that, if it wasn't for the need to honor existing contracts, which obviously we have no choice in doing, but I'm just suggesting that we would have a zero budget if it wasn't for contractual increases, which we're obliged to pay, and which we will pay. But that's a big cost of doing business in the city. Councillor Kipp.
Yeah, could you go back to slide page 11? It's the benefit cost 2008, right there. It says total benefits 2012, 6.8, and it includes the surplus. So that means it's reduced by 230,000?
Yes, Your Worship.
6.8 million for benefit costs is more than 3%, isn't it? Because 1% of budget is 800-something thousand. So I'm confused on the 3%.
That's 1% of taxes, Your Worship, not 1% of budget.
The budget. So the budget's
about 170.
Yeah, okay, that's right. I was confused. Thank you. A lot of figures for a guy like me. Oh, who's acting weird?
No, there's no further speakers. So, and the mayor is about to give a report. So we'll just wait till he comes back. Wait till he comes back.
He just left on Earth Hour. Do you want to move?
I can't give his report. I guess I could.
He's got 2 reports to do, the mayor.
Well, I guess to keep the wheels in motion, it's a challenge that we've received from the city of Kamloops, Earth Hour Challenge, dear Mayor Rattan. On behalf of my colleagues on council, staff, and the citizens of Kamloops, I would like to extend a friendly challenge to the city of Nanaimo to see which community can make the most impact during Earth Hour. Earth Hour is on March the 23rd from 8:30 to 9:30 p.m. The losing community's mayor will wear a blazer or Clippers jersey at a future council meeting. It has been a few years since I last wore a Clippers jersey. So let us know if you're up for the challenge. So that's a challenge to our worship. So he wears a Clippers jersey, or the other mayor has to wear a Clippers jersey. There you go.
Well, that's thank you very much. That's the Mayor Peter Millibar, and I think he actually maybe didn't touch on. I'm sorry. Was that he actually played for the Nanaimo Clippers at one time? I guess several years ago. So that'll be the challenge. We'll see what happens with that. So the pressure's on. We need to make sure that Nanaimo comes through on this one. Thank you for that. The other item I wanted to mention on it is we have Simon Seniak will be coming to Nanaimo, and you know, this is a little unusual, and we don't normally acknowledge, you know, a group coming to town of this nature, but I think I'd like to momentarily break from tonight's meeting agenda to raise the awareness of an upcoming event taking place on March 18th, which is tonight at the Nanaimo, at the Port Theatre. And at 7 p.m., the well-known author and speaker, Simon Seniak, will be giving his popular presentation based on his best-selling book, Start and Why. And so he's regarded as an original thinker on methods to stimulate action, and he teaches leaders and organizations how to inspire people. So people interested in going to the event, it's going to be at the Port Theatre, and you can contact the Port Theatre for more information on that. So we will now move into item 8, 8A, Community Safety and Development, and it will be development permit DP 741 at 1000 Stewart Avenue, and the purpose is to obtain council approval to issue a development permit for the construction of a 7-meter wide waterfront walkway, a gatehouse, and a piling structure for a future over-the-water building. The permit includes one variance.
I move that council issue development permit number DP 741 at 1000 Stewart Avenue with the following variances. The required water course setback with the natural boundary of Newcastle Channel is 15 meters. The proposed setback is 0 meters. A proposed variance of 15 meters.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Bestwick.
Right, but I was going to make the motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Kipp, did you have something you wanted to?
Yeah, on this one, it's an interesting one. Although we're varying our riparian setback 15 meters, in this area and this location, I support this one. It's a continuation of our beautiful waterfront. It just makes sense, and I know we're looking over a riparian area regulation soon, but this one makes sense, and I don't want to be ahead of the regulations, but I believe in this one, so I support it. Thank you.
No, that's a good point, Councillor Kipp, because I think we're actually dealing with the walkway in particular, and that we have to do this in order to make that possible. And I'm all for enhancing the waterfront along there. Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I agree that it's important to consider the waterfront trail completement, and considering the Department of Federal Fisheries and Oceries and the Nanaimo Port Authority and the Brecon Newcastle Community Association are all in full support of this application. I will support it.
Okay, Councillor Patchy.
It's all been said. I'll be supporting it for the same reasons, and I do make a distinction between riparian issues that touch the salt water as opposed to streams and rivers, so I shall be supporting this as well.
Good point. Okay, no further questions. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 8B, development permit DP 803 at 1860 Dufferin Crescent. And there are two bylaws before us.
Move both of the bylaws.
1 and 2. Is there a second?
Want them read out or anything?
Sorry?
Moving staff recommendation.
You want me to?
You can read them out if you wish.
Okay, I will. So the motion, one of two, and motion 1 is that the official community plan amendment bylaw number 2012 number 6500.018 to redesignate lands from light industrial to corridor to permit a mixed-use development, including a liquor store and community meeting room, be adopted. And the second motion, that the zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.023 to rezone from high-tech industrial I3 to community corridor COR3 to allow for a mixed-use development be adopted. And moved and seconded. Okay. Any discussion? I see none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carry. Motions carry.
I move that council issue development permit number DP 803 at 1850/1860 Dufferin Crescent, subject to lot consolidation with the following variances.
Were you going to read all those variances?
The maximum front yard setback is 6 meters. The proposed building setback variance is 9.95 meters. A proposed variance of 3.95 meters. Oh, and there's more.
Oh,
interesting.
Yes, carry on.
Oh, I wish I didn't read this now. The required on-site parking is 32 parking spaces. The subject property has 11 parking spaces, a proposed variance of 21 parking spaces. The minimum landscape treatment level to D planting area width is 1.8 meters and requires a solid 1.8 meter high fence. The proposed minimum landscape treatment level to D planting area width is 1 meter with no fence, a proposed variance of 0.8 meters and a fence. And the last one is the maximum height of a retaining wall is 1.8 meters. The proposed retaining wall north property line has a height of 3.4 meters, a proposed height variance of 1.2 meters.
Now, it was moved by Councillor Henderson, and we do have a seconder? Second. Moved and seconded by Councillor Brennan. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into item C, development permit DP 804 at 2920 Robson Road. And Mr. Tucker, our director of planning, is going to introduce this application. Mr. Tucker?
Yes, Your Worship. Council may recall that this development permit came before them a few months ago. At that time, the development permit was rejected, and the city took follow-up action to request the removal of the two sheds on the subject property. The applicant agreed to the removal of one of those sheds, but wished to come back to ask for council to reconsider the keeping of the shed that was fully completed at the time that the first application was made. So tonight's application is before you as a combination of one of the sheds being removed, but requesting the other shed to remain where it is, and so asking council's reconsideration of this matter.
Thank you. We have a delegation, Mr. Duncan Bamforth and Mr. Steve Toth. Gentlemen, if you're here. Welcome. welcome.
Good evening. I'm the owner, Duncan Bamforth. The reason I wasn't at the last council meeting was I wasn't made aware of the meeting, so I didn't get to address you, the council. The issue that I had was that when this all came about, I was given the opportunity. I did build the one shed that we're talking about now when I built my house. It is next to Departure Bay Creek. It didn't require a permit at the time because it's within the boundaries of non-requirement for a permit. Nothing was said at the time of building the house about the shed. Then it came up when I built the second shed that's in question was a wood shed, which was on the property, which I now have removed because it was on the property line. The concern was that I was told through the process of the bylaw was that my recommendation was to get an environmentalist company to look at it and to give me a feedback if he thought it was any problems to the Departure Bay Creek or if it was damaging in any way. I did at that time meet with Steve Toth and Associates, and from his input at that time, I decided to proceed with asking for the development permit, which I did, and I did subsequently hire him to do a report, which he sent off to MOE, and they had no issues with the structure itself. And my understanding is, but Steve will talk about that a little bit more, about the setbacks and what they really are and how those are set in place to begin with. I believe it's just an easy way to do the assessment from the creek, but when you do an actual more detailed report, the sheds are really nowhere near the encroachment that we're talking about. So that, in that case, I would like the council to approve the shed to stay there, and then I'd just like to ask Steve Toth. He can do a bit of a summary on his report and why he figures it's not damaging.
Okay, sorry, before you go, Councillor Paggi, the question is for the delegation here.
I have a question, one for the delegation and one for staff, if I may. The staff one first, if I may. The records of our council meeting of December the 3rd of last year show that this particular property was given a variance already, a riparian waterway variance, from 15 meters to 3 meters on September the 9th in 2002. And before I ask Mr. Bamford a question, I just want to make sure whether you concur with that.
Mr. Tucker?
Yes, Your Worship. The variance that Councillor Paggi is referring to was part of the original development permit application for the 3 lots, which are the 3 houses which adjoin each other on Robson Road, and there was a variance granted for to allow for the construction of those 3 dwelling units.
But those other 2 units closer to Bay Street would not be affected at all by a 15-meter setback, would it?
I could just read from the original report. I'm reading from the report to Council of September 3rd, 2002. There's a setback variance from Bay Street for the first lot, which is closest to Bay Street, from 7.5 meters to 6 meters. There was a setback variance for all 3 of the lots from the unnamed creek from 15 meters to 3 meters. There was a setback variance from Departure Bay Creek from 15 meters to 12 meters for the subject property in question.
Okay. Follow-up, if I may, to staff on that one. So the single-family residence that was referred to in 2002, that is now built within the variance that was given then, is that still a single-family residence, or is it a house with a suite in it?
Mr. Bamford would have
House with a suite.
It's house with a suite. Okay, thank you for that. And my final question to Mr. Bamford, if I may. I've had a peek over the wall now and then at your place because I live very close by. I noticed that the one shed which you say has been removed, there's still portions of it there. There's the one side is still up and there's the flooring is still there.
A fence. I'm making it into a fence? The two sides?
No, one of the walls is against your house.
No, I haven't.
There's 2 garbage pails there now.
No, the city's looked at it. Gary Noble was out there and looked at it. It's a fence. I took it down the shed because it's on pier blocks, and then I'm finishing the fence off to give me privacy from the neighbor, and then that will be finished off. It's not finished yet.
There is a fence sticking out from your property that one of your neighbors claims is on city property.
Yes.
That fence is on city property?
Yes, there is a portion.
And why is that?
I'll remove the fence. I don't have a problem with removing the fence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that's fine for this delegation. Now, you had Mr. Toth. Did you want to add something to the presentation?
Just in light of that information that came through about the original variance that was granted, that was 3 meters, reduction from 15 to 3 meters. Is that 3 meters from top of bank?
Go ahead. Do you want to clarify that, Mr. Tucker?
From 15 meters to 12 meters from the top of bank.
For Departure Bay Creek?
From Departure Bay Creek.
From the unnamed tributary?
From the unnamed tributary, from 15 meters to 3 meters from top of bank.
I see. Based on my approximate measurements made in the field, I have a distance from top of ravine bank to the existing garden shed that's non-permanent, it's on concrete blocks, is 4.6 meters. Just for clarification. Duncan asked me to do a riparian areas regulation assessment back in September, and I did that. And if you're not familiar with the RER, you have 2 options. You have a simple assessment or a detailed assessment that you can follow. And I generally follow the detailed assessment methods. You get better results. It's based more on science rather than political boundaries. And applying that to this unnamed tributary to Departure Bay Creek, which I believe is not fish-bearing because it has a barrier on it, you end up with the minimum setbacks allowable under the RAR, which is 10 meters from high water mark. So if you can picture this tributary in a ravine, you have 10 meters from the high water mark down in the ravine. Then you need supporting geotechnical assessments to provide a safe building setback from top of ravine bank. Now the city has setbacks from top of ravine bank or top of bank, depending on the situation. In this case, there's a ravine. So it's 15 meters beyond top of ravine bank, which was originally put in place to meet or beat the RAR requirements back when the RAR came out. And so we now have these situations where the simple assessment was applied in order to meet or beat the requirements of the RAR. And I'm getting called back to properties within the city of Nanaimo, and I'm conducting these detailed assessments, and I'm getting a totally different setback that the province will sign off on. So this was submitted and accepted by the province for a 10 meter from high water mark setback. And then, like I said, generally what they want to see is that there's been a geotechnical assessment done to determine the safe setbacks from top of ravine bank.
Okay, well, maybe I wouldn't mind having some staff input at this point to find out who's going to be doing this. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrew. As Mr. Toth has said, He submitted the report. The report said that the sheds in question would have no impact on the riparian habitat. That report, as Mr. Toth has said, was accepted by the province, and our recommendation from staff was to approve the development permit. And Mr. Bamford has agreed to remove one of the sheds, as I said earlier, and is now back asking for reconsideration on that second shed.
Okay.
Can I add one thing?
Sure. Well, then, Councillor Brennan, for which part of the delegation, or both, or for staff?
It's to staff.
Okay. Do you want to ask it, and then just want to wait one, and then we'll get you up here. Go ahead, Councillor Brennan.
So the procedure is that the report, the riparian area report, is done and then submitted to the province, and the province approves or doesn't approve it.
Yes, Your Worship. One thing I should clarify is the city's official community plan designates this a development permit area for aquatic habitat. And the criteria that we have in the OCP to evaluate these setback relaxations is for the applicants who wish to encroach into the established area to hire a registered biologist and do a report and submit this to the province, because they're the approving authority. So that's what's been done in this and many other cases. It gets submitted to the province, and the province decides whether it is valid or not valid, and then we follow up with a variance to match the setback that the biologist has identified.
Maybe, Councillor Brennan, I'll come back, but just for clarity then, are we really just making a decision based on the retention of that second shed? Is that what we're really dealing with here? One is taken down, or largely taken down, and the other one, so we're deciding on the residual, on the remaining shed then?
Yes.
I think that's the issue. Councillor Brennan, sorry, did you have something?
Yeah, well, I'm having some difficulty with the question, basically, of the law on this. And once the province says yes, where does our authority come in to say no?
Your Worship, this is very similar to a form and character development permit, where when you establish development permit areas in your official community plan and you establish guidelines, if the applicant meets the test of the guidelines, that's a very good question, because they have met the test, so council is somewhat obligated to evaluate and issue the permit based on that information. It's a little bit cumbersome given the fact that you have to follow up with a variance, whereas with a form and character development permit, you're just issuing the permit. But that is the case here, where it's been proven that this is the aquatic variance. The province has accepted. Now council needs to follow up with the variance to the setback.
So just let me walk through this then. We set up specific guidelines. 1, 2, 3, 4 have to be met. The applicant then meets those guidelines, and it comes back to us simply to determine whether those guidelines have been met. Is that correct? Like, tick, tick, tick the boxes. Yes, the province has approved it. Yes, this, yes, that.
Yes, that's true. And as part of the review that council has asked, we're going to provide, if we can find some options for council, if council wants to take a different approach that would involve either more stringent restrictions before they enter into this, or to remove the setback altogether and just leave it up to a qualified environmental biologist to submit to the province, and they don't have to come before council at all. So we'll provide you with a range of options.
But sorry, I was going to say, but we can't, we're dealing now with the site-specific case, this particular one, and we have to make a decision tonight. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Go ahead.
But as the rules are tonight, we set up some specific guidelines that have to be met way back when. You're telling us they've been met. So if we don't want to see these kinds of setbacks, we have to change the rules at the beginning of the process. Otherwise, we're changing them in the middle of the process.
Well, I don't believe it's going to be that easy, and I can't give you an answer on how to change that to.
No, I'm not asking that. I'm asking, in order to change the outcome of a situation like this, not necessarily this one, but a situation like this, the rules at the beginning have to be changed. Wrong?
possibly wrong, because I really think that you haven't established the criteria. You've established the policies in which it should be approved. So I'm not aware currently how we could actually get ahead of the province in terms of the authority to regulate this. It's their powers, and I don't know if we can fetter in their ability to regulate it.
Okay, thank you.
That makes it awfully clear. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. If we're finished with the delegation, I'd be prepared to move staff's recommendation.
Well, I believe, did you want to make a comment? One of you did, I think.
After that, I'm not sure if it's relevant, but
okay. Well, go.
I guess just the frustration is, from a homeowner's point of view, is that in 2002, this property was allowed to be subdivided. There are so many restrictions on that property. It was for sale for 5 years. I know I did go into it knowing that there were many restrictions, and I do like a bit of a challenge to design something that will fit on something like that. I think I've done a nice job. It's a nice looking house, but there are other restrictions too that you place, such as I wasn't allowed to put an attached garage on in a certain area. It had to be detached. There's so many rules that make it difficult to build on properties that you guys are allowing to be put up for sale, not us. So that's the frustration, where I have a garden shed put in there to store camping equipment and whatever, right? But I don't understand what the issue is on that when it's not been proven, basically, that it's not endangering or harming the environment, because I'm not about endangering the environment. So.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your thoughts. Councillor Greaves.
Move staff's recommendation.
Moved and second. Any further discussion? Although, Councillor Patchy.
Well, there are other questions that partially have been answered. You know that we are going to have a review of the riparian issues. The Departure Bay Neighborhood Association has asked us to delay this request, and I am going to stick with that request from the neighborhood. On that piece.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be supporting it. I think council has much better things to do than to be arguing over a shed, but also the fact that the Ministry of Environment has accepted the report, and these are our guidelines and our policy that a developer goes and fulfills these things and gets the required acceptance from the province, and we move forward. So because you have an inkling or a feeling, I would much rather hear from a registered biologist that says that, no, this is not going to work out.
Okay, I see no further questions. The motion on the floor is the staff recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Patchy opposed. Councillor Brennan opposed. The balance of council in favor. The motion passes. Moving into the next item, which is D like Delta Development Permit number DP 833 at 20 Barsby Avenue, and the purpose is to obtain council approval to renew the development permit for a 58-unit multifamily residential project located at 20 Barsby Avenue with 3 variances. Staff recommendation that the motion is to renew subject to the variances.
Staff's recommendation.
Second, moved and second. Discussion, Councillor Kipp.
This plan much different than the last time. And how many times are they allowed to reopen this file to continue it? I'm in support of the type of development that it is, but I'm wondering about, is this the 4th time we've gone through this?
Your Worship, this is the 4th time around, and that's something possibly for the governance review. I don't believe we have any limitations currently on restricting it.
Thank you.
Councillor Patchy.
To staff, if I may, please. The aquatic setback request for variance on this one, was that achieved the first, the second, the third, or the 4th time that
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, this is a property that originally was approved by council back when we had an environmental coordinator, and the environmental coordinator recommended that we proceed with the setback as it's proposed, and had some mitigation plans that we thought were appropriate to apply to the property as it develops, which is attached as part of its schedule. And this property has really caught sort of in the intertidal mode, so its issue in terms of QIP was not applied at the time the environmental coordinator looked at it, but it was reviewed by our environmental coordinator and recommended.
Thank you.
Councillor Brennan.
I'm not really sure that it really matters how many times they want to renew it, because if it was a good idea at the beginning and it continues to be a good idea, then what would be the reason to hold it up? Simply that they had a good idea too many times?
Plus, there is a fee too.
People get too smart. They could turn into smarty pants and get all these ideas all the time. But on this particular one, I think that maybe I'm not sure, because this riparian setback is difficult. But I think on this one, we should be able to stop it in time, freeze it, and say, well, on this one, let's wait until the outcome of the riparian area review, because we may have some different information. And it doesn't look like, this is urgent in any way, unless it is, unless these things, okay. So, while there is a motion on the floor at this point? Yes? I would refer this motion, would move to refer this motion to come back to council after the outcome of the riparian setback review.
I'll second that. Move and second the motion to refer. Mr. Kenny, or Mr. Tucker, or Mr. Swaype, does everyone have any indication of what time frame that would actually mean? Mr. Tucker.
Your Worship, I don't believe that there's any urgency per se on this, other than the property is on the market at the moment, and having a valid development permit would be a factor in its marketability.
Okay. So the motion to refer is on the floor now. Would anyone like to speak? We have Councillor Kipp and Councillor Johnson. Do you want to speak to the motion to refer? That's what we're voting on now.
I have a question about the referral, Your Worship.
Sure.
I thought there was a timeline, a deadline between an elapsed permit application.
Councillor, they're valid for a period of 2 years. Frequently, applicants come in just prior to the expiry of that period to renew their permit. Sometimes they lapse, and applicants come back after the fact to renew their permit. So it's usually how well their BF system works on their day timers to bring these items forward.
So there wouldn't be a consequence then to deferring this?
We expect to have the riparian area review wrapped up in either late April or early May. So this would be a matter of a couple of months, and I don't. The applicant obviously would like to keep a valid permit on the go, so there is some risk there, I suppose, but that would be council's decision.
Just to add to that, I think as Mr. Tucker said earlier, the impact is potentially that it will make it so he can't sell the property, at least for the price that he's asking for.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have, I'm showing Councillor Brennan, did you have something new to add on to? And we have Councillor Kipp, Councillor Greaves, Councillor McKay, and I'm just going to ask, is this on the motion to refer?
Yeah, it relates to my first part. If it was a good idea then, and I agree with it, and that's my concern with these, is they continue to come back. There's a cost to us attached. Is there any reapplication fee on these? I think it just comes under the same application, or is there?
It's treated as a new application, so they would be applying again for the same. Yep.
Okay.
Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Worship. I don't want this referred because I have something to say about the, I would like to defeat the deferral because I have something to say about the issue after we either defeat it or not. So my argument was not...
Subject to the vote, is it?
Subject to the...
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really concerned about creating a situation where this approval is now in limbo. And I think we should just leave it alone. It's an application in process, in progress. It's been in an application in progress for a number of years, and market conditions haven't permitted the development to go ahead. So I just would rather just defeat the referral and just carry on. It is in progress and it's been improved a number of times. Thank you.
Okay, that's all the speakers. The motion on the floor is to refer.
Defer.
Defer, I'm sorry. Yeah, that sounds nice to defer. So that said, we'll call for a question. All those in support of deferring? Opposed? Okay, so we have Councillor McKay, we have Councillor Anderson, Councillor Johnson, Councillor Kipp, and Councillor Greaves opposed, and so the motion fails. Correct?
Motion to deferral fails. Motion to defer fails.
Yeah, fails. Yeah.
And the original motion remains on the floor.
Okay. So now that we're back to the beginning, does Councillor Graves, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I don't know if this is appropriate right at the moment, but I'm going to let it fly and see what the riparian issue that I think we're dealing with right now really has nothing to do with this Barsby Avenue permit. The setback is from the Millstone River. That has not changed. So it's not like they've, messed around with that. The front yard setback has changed, which really doesn't deal with the riparian, and the maximum allowable building height has not changed as well. Mm-hmm. So we're really not dealing with a variance in the riparian area.
I see a puzzled look on staff's face. Is it?
No, not puzzled, Your Worship. I just wanted, as the page is oriented on the iPad was all.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I had gone cross-eyed momentarily. On page 54, just wanted to point out that as part of this application, there's a dedication of the area adjacent to the millstone as a park dedication, and that would be in the riparian area, so it's to protect that. So what Councillor Greaves said was correct.
Oh.
Yeah. You were
okay. Councillor Brennan.
We would be approving the development permit, reapproving it with those conditions, with the aquatic setback being 20 meters, not. The proposed setback is 10 meters, a proposed variance of 20 meters, so it isn't 15, right?
The millstone has a 30-meter setback, that's correct.
Already? And then this would be on top of it? No.
No.
Reduces it to 10.
The starting point for measurement is 30 meters back from the top of bank. This, in the renewal of this, if council were to support it, is to reduce that from 30 meters to 10 meters.
And would we be looking at similar questions in the riparian area review process? Would we be looking at this kind of thing?
In the riparian area review, we're going to be looking at how the process is set up, what the conditions are and guidelines within our development permit guidelines, what the state of the legislation is, and how we either are going to change those or maintain them, or whatever comes out of that as the recommendation. But as the things stand at the moment, it's based on an assessment from a qualified environmental professional.
Okay, so if we decide to change things, and this wasn't settled, we could change this? if we changed some of the policies?
We won't be changing the setbacks for the streams. That was established through a comprehensive review, and once you issued the permit, it's very difficult to go back and take away the approval that you provided.
The permit survives even if we take that designation away of?
What we'll be reviewing is the process. The actual setbacks would take a comprehensive review, which we've done. So we're just reviewing the process and the
process of burying them.
That's correct.
Right. So we could decide during that process not to allow variances. Could we?
I don't think so. I don't think that's an option.
You have to consider them.
You have to consider them, okay. Okay. So all I'm saying is that this might change subsequent to, if we were looking at this after the report, we might make a different decision. You're saying we can't do
I actually don't believe that is probably going to result. How you get to the end is going to possibly change how the process works.
So because nobody's really clear on what is going to come out of that review, I'd like, and of course we defeated that, I'd like to wait and make some decision after we've got it. And because we're not doing that, then I'm not going to support this because it doesn't allow for a review of something.
Yes, Your Worship, maybe just let me try one more time. At the end of the day, this is a provincial regulation in which we cannot fetter in their regulations of a biologist submitting a report for approval. So at the end of the day, regardless of the process, that's going to be how it gets decided. Whether there's a whole bunch of work negotiating beforehand, before there's an environmentalist involved on the property, that may change. But I cannot tell you that at the end of the day that you can change the process with the province.
Yeah, I think the concern, Mrs. Swaby, for some anyway, is that if we do pass this, that's good for 2 more years. And if there is any attempt to change the riparian regulations during that 2-year period, we're still more or less bound to accept this 2-year commitment to it.
Your Worship, that's up to Council. This was reviewed by our professional biologist. Staff believes it's appropriate to carry on and approve this. And if the process changes, we'll capture other properties as we move forward. But the goalposts have been set for this applicant. He met all the tests, and we think it's worthy of approving.
Okay. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question on another aspect of this. I have the sales opportunity here in front of me. It also speaks that development cost charges to the tune of $450,000 have been waived on this. Is this part of the downtown area where we don't charge them, or is this something else?
Your Worship, I would presume that would be part of the downtown area, but that seems unlikely, and I'd have to get back to you on that.
Would you please? And then, just an observation on whether we approve riparian reports, yes or no. It says all required reports are complete, including geotechnical, environmental, archaeological, civil engineering, and registered landscape, and riparian biologist reports. It's certainly presented as a done deal. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, I see no further speakers. The motion that's back on the floor now is this staff recommendation. And Ms. Samra, do you want me to read the 3 bullets, or is that a given?
It's a given, but you may read them if you wish.
Pass. So, move staff recommendation. Is there a seconder? Move. Thank you. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we're going into E, Development Variance Permit DVP 208 at 45 Wakesai Avenue. And at this point, I'd like to ask if there's anyone in attendance tonight that wishing to speak with respect to DVP 208. And basically, it's to obtain council approval to exempt the city from constructing frontage works and services triggered by the building bylaw to construct City of Nanaimo Water Reservoir Number 1. And the staff recommendation is that council issue development variance permit DVP 208 at 645 Wakeside Avenue to allow for construction of the City of Nanaimo Water Reservoir Number 1.
So moved.
Seconder? Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. RA 308, Covenant Amendment of 72 12th Street. Purpose to provide council with the background information regarding a covenant amendment application for the property located at 72 12th Street to change the phasing of the development permitted on the site. And the staff recommendation that this report be received and direct staff to forward the item to the next public scheduled public hearing as per council's policy. Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. General amendments to zoning bylaw 2011 number 4500. The purpose is to provide detail regarding the 20 proposed general text and mapping amendments to zoning bylaw 2011 4500 Schedule A. And the staff recommendation that council receive the report pertaining to zoning amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.036. And there is an attendant bylaw, and the motion is that the zoning amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.036 general text and mapping amendments pass first reading. Moved. 1 and 2 or just 1? We're just doing 1, okay, to receive it. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And 2, the motion that rezoning an amendment bylaw 2013 number 4500.036 pass second reading. Who's like to move that one and second it? No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Road closure portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road. The purpose is to introduce highway closure and dedication removal bylaw 7163 to obtain council approval for the closure of a portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, which would allow the city to sell the property to the Church of Christ adjoining property owners. And it's my understanding this is just actually adjusting for an error that was made in the previous.
That's correct, Your Worship. The previous, when this matter came before council, the road dedication along Meredith Road had not been included in the survey plan. The correct survey plan is now attached to the bylaw.
Okay, and the motion is that council receive the report, authorize the disposition of the portion of Meredith Road, approve the acquisition of the land identified as dedicated as road, direct the mayor and corporate officer to execute the conditional contract of purchase and sale, and finally direct staff to proceed with a public notice of the road closure of a portion of Meredith Road. I think we could move all 5 as one. Okay. Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving down to bylaw, that highway closure and dedication removal portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, bylaw 2013 number 7163, pass first reading.
So moved.
Moved, second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Did you get the second or two? And the second motion, that the highway closure and dedication removal portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, bylaw 2013 number 7163, pass second reading. Moved, second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Land exchange agreement between School District 68 and the City of
Your
Nanaimo.
Worship, I'll remove myself on perceived conflict.
Perceived, okay. Thank you. It show that Councillor Brennan has absented herself for a perceived conflict of interest. So the item I again, the land exchange agreement between School District 68 and the City of Nanaimo, and the purpose is to obtain council approval to enter into a formal land exchange agreement with the School District number 68 that is mutually beneficial to both parties. And I'd just like to make a very quick comment here that I'm extremely pleased with this, and a huge accolade to the board of the School District 68 and certainly to our own staff at the City of Nanaimo. There's no actual direct financial contribution involved. It's simply just a land transfer, and I think it serves very well all the interest that the City of Nanaimo has, and certainly it seems also to be very, very beneficial to School District 68. So it's a great example here of how we're able to work with some of the other entities in Nanaimo for the betterment of our community. So having said that, the motion that Council approve the land exchange agreement between School District 68 and the City of Nanaimo, and 2, authorize the Mayor and Corporate Officer to execute the necessary documents to effect the transaction, and we can move 1 and 2 together.
So moved, Your Worship. Moved
and seconded. I see no discussion. It can't be Councillor Brennan because she's not in the room. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. And property maintenance bylaw. Oh, do you want to, maybe someone could, thank you very much, Councillor Graves. Very decent thing to do. And we can go ahead with the property maintenance bylaw 1990 number 3704. It's requested that council or anyone wishing to speak with respect to the property maintenance at the properties listed below, and the purpose is to obtain council approval to enforce the property maintenance bylaw at the properties as listed. And the first property is 673 Hamilton Avenue. Discarded stove, van full of garbage, piles of wood, piles of garbage, and miscellaneous debris. Is there anyone in attendance that'd like to speak to matters related to 673 Hamilton Avenue? And the second property is 499 7th Street, discarded wood and construction debris, household garbage, household furniture, metal items, and miscellaneous debris. Is there anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters concerning 499 7th Street? Seeing none, if someone would like to move that council pursuant to property maintenance bylaw 1990 number 3704 direct the owners of the following properties, which I just listed, to remove the materials listed below from the premises within 14 days, the work will be done by the city or its agents at the owner's cost. Move second, moved and seconded. No questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Appointment of bylaw enforcement officers, and I think Mr. Tucker, Mr. Andrew Tucker, Director of Planning, is to introduce the report, and I believe he's also going to introduce the individuals, or certainly at least identify the individuals involved. Mr. Tucker?
Yes, Your Worship. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you an update on the rollout of the moving the parking function in-house. The report and the appointment of bylaw officers this evening is part of that rollout. Effective next Monday, March 18th, the parking patrollers you'll see on the downtown streets will be city staff. City staff have, we've been lucky to hire our 4 patrollers, and they will be taking over from Robbins Parking effective next Monday. When Robbins provided the parking enforcement function, their patrol staff were also sworn in as bylaw enforcement officers, but only under the traffic and highways bylaw. Our bylaw officers as city staff will be able to enforce the full range of city bylaws and provide other security and downtown enforcement functions besides just the parking function. In addition to that, they're being trained to act as ambassadors for the city and assist with wayfinding and direction and so on in the downtown.
I guess, Mr. Secretary, sorry, I guess I can ask that the 4 individuals named here in the report have all the qualifications necessary to enforce all of the bylaws?
They certainly do, and they've been in training for the past few weeks. Those 4 individuals, Hugo DiBiase, Barry Hornby, Alan McGrath, and Wally Taylor, are the 4 that we're asking to be appointed this evening. Just for the listeners at home, effective next Monday, if you receive a parking ticket, we invite you to come to the Service and Resource Center at 411 Dunsmuir Street to pay that ticket. And the patrollers themselves, they will be operating out of the Community Policing office on 18 Victoria Crescent. So they will be operating from a downtown office location. And we're currently working on some revisions to some of the parking information information that we have to assist with this rollout of the parking function. So with that, by way of an update, I'd ask that Council appoint these 4 individuals as bylaw enforcement officers.
Thank you. Would somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Moved. And seconded. Councillor Kipp, did you want to speak to it?
In the report, it doesn't say anything about the ambassadorial role, and I thought that was one of our points when we're shifting from that. What type of ambassadorial role will they be doing? Do you know, or is that building? Because all I've heard is parking and bylaw.
The report is directed to the step of appointing them as bylaw officers, but that is still part of their function to act as ambassadors. That would be, as I said in my introductory remarks, things like wayfinding, assisting where the parking is. They may be able to help resolve disputes on the street and act in that manner as well.
And a follow-up too.
Yes. How
many will be working? They're working Monday to Friday, Monday, Saturday?
Monday, Saturday, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question to staff. Once we make these appointments, how do we go back? If we so choose, or can we amend these appointments to be termed?
When the decision was made to bring the function in-house, discussions took place with CUPE regarding that function, and there's a letter of understanding with the union pertaining to should council decide to go back, that there is an out clause there through that letter of understanding.
Thank you.
Only for a limited time, though.
Yes, that's correct.
How long is that?
I believe the date is December 31st, 2014, but I would have to confirm that.
Thank you. Supplemental question. The fellows that we were seeing there right now, I noticed they've got new smart uniforms. They're as close to RoboCop as you can get, with black from head to toe with a little bit of striping. What consideration have we given relative to the adversarial relationship that normally happens between a client and a bylaw enforcement officer relative to the uniforms? Are they going to be they going to look like a policeman, or are they going to look like a tourism ambassador, or what are they going to look like? I haven't been directly involved in the uniform selection, but I believe the uniforms look similar to our existing bylaw enforcement officers' uniforms.
Yeah, the black uniforms I think you're describing, Councillor McKay, those are the uniforms that Robbins supplies.
Yes.
So our bylaw officers are blue, I believe, if that makes any difference.
I guess my point is that they don't look that much friendlier than what they're replacing. Thank you.
Okay, so we have it moved and seconded. Question on the motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the toilet rebate program, the purpose is to provide council with an update, with up-to-date information rather regarding the toilet rebate program. The staff recommendation is that council direct staff to include the toilet rebate program in the current review of the 2008 water conservation strategy. That's it. So move staff recommendation. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The unresolved building deficiencies bylaw contravention notices. Purpose is to obtain council approval to register a bylaw contravention notice on the title of affected property to advise those with an interest in the property of the regulations contravened and to provide disclosure to future owners and to protect taxpayers against potential claims with regard to the regulations contravened. Staff recommendation of council by resolution instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the property at 1415 Fielding Road, construction of a secondary suite without building permit at the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under Section 5.7 of the Community Charter. It doesn't say, but should I just see if there's anyone here that would like to speak to matters related to that particular property, 1415 Fielding Road? Seeing none, if somebody would like to make that motion. Moved. Second? No questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Corporate services, down into 9A, delegations pertaining to the 2013-2017 financial plan.
I believe council and staff have spent considerable time on expenditure of the taxpayers' money. I also believe in statements I've heard, sometimes it's like a wheelbarrow full of money. Even tonight, responsible government. And if I'm correct, in an item coming up after this, I believe it says we have $2.9 million left over from expenditures last year after you would put amounts into reserve accounts and everything, just as you have done for 2013. Therefore, it's our money. Give it back. Stop putting it in other reserve accounts you've already put money into. You've made that decision for 2013 for every year, and when there's a surplus, give it back. Reduce the taxes. You guys sit here for the election. You could hold taxes. Wouldn't that 2.9 equal 3%? No increase this year. If you stop taking our wheelbarrow money and throw it into the pots again.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want to speak concerning the 2013-2017 financial plan? That's what we're on now.
Jess Anderson, I'd like to speak on the surplus allocation. Last December 19th, 7 p.m. meeting, the City Council, I showed you a method of putting money into a permanent fund to fund culture and arts and so on and so forth. At the time, Council expressed interest, so did the City Manager, and you were going to check into whether that method was possible to be done. Last year's budget didn't show anything. This year's budget doesn't show anything. I'm going to make the same request. If you put the money that you have as surplus with your co-op, you get businesses having money available as a pool of cash. The money stays in Mid-Island. If you go interest less inflation on it, as I pointed out last year, you don't lose that value. The interest can be used for things like the Arts Centre that you're proposing to fix up, or to do matching funds with groups. It becomes a permanent fund where you don't have to ask for increases. So I'm asking if you would consider on your surplus doing that this time. And as a point of information, you were going to check out last year whether the city could do this type of funding. I never heard from you guys. Did the city administration check into it? What were the results?
Yeah, just a quick.
Councillor Johnstone, go ahead.
Thank you. I believe we advised you at that time that we do have a per capita amount of money that's put into cultural efforts, and I believe it's just under $3, $2.25.
I understand that you set aside a certain amount of money. What I've been saying all along is, why don't you put aside a permanent fund so you don't have to have people begging for it every year and choosing who and what and how gets it from year to year. Make it permanent funding so you're not always asking for increases to cover the increased costs for groups.
Well, of course, until the groups come before us, we really don't know what their needs are. Before you go,
separate funds so that you don't have to have increases.
Understood the message, sir. We have a question. Councillor Kipp.
Another question. This is the endowment that you talked about. The city of, I think it was Chatham or somewhere in Ontario, had this similar thing. It was an endowment.
I showed you that I'd done it myself at the University of Lethbridge, and it works.
I'm sorry that I never looked anything further after that point. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. You just past the appointment of the bylaw enforcement officers. As I recall, this came about as a result of a study of contracted services that suggested that there might be some savings in doing this. I would like to know what the reflection of those are in the budget and financial plan and what they're anticipated to be.
Okay, I don't know who wants to do this. I don't think there was a huge savings, but there may be some. I think it depends on how effective the enforcement is done on it.
Your Worship, at the end of the day, after all the evaluations, it was recommended by staff that we bring it in-house, that it would be cost neutral at the end of the year. However, the service would be different, especially in terms of the ambassadorial program, and therefore advantageous that we take a look at doing this and then evaluate it after the year.
Yeah, I don't believe there was a financial consideration in this particular one. I think it was just what we consider to be an improvement in service.
I'm thinking in terms of the benefits that are going to accrue to city employees, as health benefits, everything that's posed, and whether that's still neutral.
It's our understanding it is at this point.
I'll watch.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hamlin Bay Road. I'd like to speak on long-term asset management and long-term debt, in particularly addressing the Vancouver Island Convention Centre. The Vancouver Island Convention Centre is a key publicly held asset. Council, in its esteemed wisdom or lack thereof, seems to believe that it should enter the realm of private enterprise and try to negotiate a purported deal for a hotel supposedly to maximize the potential of this asset. How this can be done in a supposed best year ever that we've supposedly had, and we're still throwing 200,000 plus at it, is hard to understand. Articles written as of late in the Nanaimo Daily News have brought to light the makings of a possible deal for a hotel to complement the VICC. While not a yay or nay has been mentioned by City Council, the media has stated that the statements of said deal have been corroborated through separate sources. In-camera meetings have their place, but Council's propensity to meet behind closed doors to do business on behalf of its citizens lead one to sometimes have to rely on news that impacts them from other sources. Quite a shame, isn't it? Some details on the yet supposed convention center hotel deal are truly striking and certainly do not live up to good asset management and probably even enter into the realm of mismanagement and poor fiscal responsibility. The 30 to 50 year proposed lease of the convention center, shades of another closed-door deal giveaway.
Yeah. This is, first of all, what you're dealing with is speculation. You're referring to a newspaper article. We have not yet received any kind of a legal binding agreement on what they're prepared to do. And if you want to go on the newspaper report, I would suggest that there's every reason to believe that in the future, a lot of the information that you heard or read about in the paper will be inaccurate. So it's hard for us to speculate on what might be until we get an absolute contract from these people telling us what they want to do. We don't have a deal. So you can speculate all you want, but we don't have that information at this point.
Point of order.
You don't have a point of order. We do.
Your Worship, the point of order that I'd like to make is this is a delegation pertaining to the financial plan.
Yeah, 2013, 2017 financial plan.
The other conversation is something entirely different. But this is, reserved for delegations on the financial plan, and I would suggest that the Speaker's not confining his comments to that.
Certainly long-term asset management, the effect it may have on my taxes.
Your Worship, could I get you to make a ruling on my point of order, please?
Yeah, if you want to deal with specifically with items pertaining to the 2013-2017 financial plan, go ahead. And if you're going to deal with the hotel, until we'll have to rule you out of order.
The 30 to 50-year proposed lease.
Well, here we go again. We have not entered into that.
Convention Center, I'm talking about a city asset that's owned by the public.
You're dealing with the 2013-2017 financial plan?
I'm dealing with long-term asset management.
Well, we're talking about the 2013-2017 financial plan. That's all.
And we haven't at all in the financial plan talked about asset management?
Many times.
So he's okay. Point of order, Your Worship. He's talking about asset management. That's in our budget.
Yeah.
I can't believe these points of order because the man's mentioned.
But what is it? I don't know where you're going, sir. If you're going on a report from the newspaper, I'm speaking. If you're going on a report from the newspaper, there's kind of a challenge with that.
I'm out of here for a minute.
Good.
Can I continue, please?
Sure.
Quit being interrupted.
You know, if you want to be rude, then I'll rule you entirely out of order and we won't hear from you.
Actually, you've been rude.
Show us a little
by
courtesy and
interrupting.
continue on.
I always show courtesy at every meeting I attend.
And continue on, please.
Thank you. The 30 to 50-year proposed lease of the Convention Center and Parkade, not only in debt ourselves, but our children and our children's children. If this is not long-term debt, I personally do not know what is. Given the magnitude of the dollars contained in this supposed deal, up to a maximum of $1.23 million per year to cover operating losses, plus the VICC marketing and advertising costs, plus I would presume the maintenance costs and the desire to build a connector between the supposed hotel.
Yeah, I guess you don't quite understand what we're doing here.
Let me just try.
Please, you go ahead.
The reason that I would call that I called a point of order is you're talking about a supposed hotel, which there is no supposed hotel. You read about something in the newspaper. Just because something is in the newspaper doesn't mean it's true. In the agenda, 9A says delegations pertaining to the 2013-2017 financial plan. So if you're saying there is something we are doing now in regards to parking, I'm fine with listening to that. If you're saying that we are going to increase the subsidy to the VICC, that's fine to hear because that's part of the budget. But if you're talking about speculation of hopes and dreams and things that we don't know about, I have to call a point of order on that.
I give.
Thank you, sir.
Just talking about asset management.
Okay.
Long-term debt.
Gord Fuller, 604 Nickel Street. How much money do we make from parking at the VICC each year?
I don't know. Do you have an approximate figure for that?
Mr. Clemens is coming, Your Worship.
For maintenance upkeep.
I think the short answer is this particular facility actually loses money every year. Yeah, can somebody hum or something while I'm doing this? It's approximately, this particular parkade is approximately a break-even proposition. It looks like it's about $40,000 net to the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and what was the subsidy to the convention center this year? And do we expect that to increase?
Your Worship, the convention center subsidy is somewhere in the neighborhood of $900,000 a year.
So we're roughly 0.5% of the budget each year, the city budget.
$900,000 would be approximately equivalent to 1% of taxes, if that's what you're looking for.
Well, no, I was talking about the percent of the budget, so it'd be about 0.5% of the budget, 1% of taxes.
Sure.
Now, over the years, we have talked about a hotel actually improving attendance and all of that. So my guess is if we had a hotel, then the subsidies would go down, parking would go up. Is there any concrete evidence other than that through an association that promotes convention centers that having a hotel would actually increase convention attendance? Is there any concrete evidence?
Mr. Kinney?
So that it would reduce the amount from our budget that we end up having to pay.
Your Worship, the operators of the conference center at Lithic Hotels and Resorts, I believe, or they certainly believe strongly that it will, that increased hotel capacity will improve the attendance at the conference center.
Allow for larger conferences.
So is there any research, statistical evidence other than someone who has a vested interest in saying something like that?
I'm not sure why you're saying they have a vested interest.
Well, you know, it's in their interest to keep their jobs. So I guess the answer would be no. Thank you.
Cool. Now, the next item is award of requests for proposals for governance review consultant services, and this is to be introduced by Councillor Greaves, the chair of the Governance Steering Committee. Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I'd like to say that I'd like to recognize Councillors Brennan, Johnston, Anderson, and McKay. They're also on the steering committee. The strategic plan was approved in July of last year, as we all know, and one of the 6 strategic priorities of the plan is for council and staff to take responsibility to become an excellent municipal government. An initiative associated with this priority that I just discussed is the commissioning of an external governance study that will review areas such as role clarification for council, committees and commissions, staff and policies for in-camera meetings. We met and interviewed. Actually, we've met 3 or 4 times now, and one morning we interviewed and shortlisted. We interviewed 2 shortlisted firms, and we were unanimous in our opinion that the Watson proposal will successfully fulfill this initiative. The consultant work is in 3 phases. I don't know if I should go through all what takes place in these phases. Phase 1 thing I'll mention is they interview council, the senior leadership team and manager of legislative services. To give another example, phase 2, they discuss the summary report and draft recommendations with council and staff. And phase 3, provide advisory services regarding policy development. And all of those phases have days attached to them, how long this would take and how much money each of those phases would cover. The committee is recommending an overall maximum of $78,000 before taxes. That includes including travel. It could cost less, with council agreeing on draft recommendations and staff doing much of the policy drafting, coming in around maybe $60,000. But if it doesn't, then the $78,000 figure is likely to be the number. This is a very important exercise. I would think I would rate it right up there with the strategic plan. Good governance being very important. And accordingly, I would move that council approve the contract for the governance policy, structure, and processes review and audit to Watson Incorporated, based on an estimated fee of up to $75,000 plus a maximum of $3,000 for travel costs.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kiv opposed. Balance of council in favor. The motion passes. Thank you. And the next item is the E-Town Hall budget meeting, and the purpose is to provide a recommended framework to council in relation to the budget-focused electronic town hall meeting. And I just would like to say this is something actually that I should pay our respect and appreciation to Councillor Anderson, who actually brought this forward. This is something that we're going to try. It hasn't been done before. I understand there may only be one other community in British Columbia that is doing this, and I think that's something we want to try. It'll be a bit of a challenge, but we're going to, this council will be up to the challenge. No question about that. So I think what we'd like to do is the council confirm the parameters for the E-Town Hall budget meeting is the staff recommendation as outlined in this report, and maybe we'll see. Mr. Holmes, did you want to expand on that a little bit, or
Mr. Cooper has some comments.
Sorry, Mr. Cooper, you're on.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the event is being held on March 25th. It's part of a regular council meeting. It'll be the first item on the agenda, and it will last for up to an hour. If there's a high level of enthusiasm, we can extend it for another 30 minutes. And the intent here is to broaden our ability to discuss the budget by welcoming in a dialogue through all sorts of different channels, including Twitter, Facebook, web forums, phone calls, and of course for the traditionalists who wish to attend meetings in person, they can come down to the Shaw Auditorium and participate that way as well. So we're busy finalizing the different pieces of this initiative, and it's important to point out that it is based on the strategic plan. It comes out of the priority taking responsibility. There's an item under there involving town hall settings, so this is the first time we're doing that as part of our strategic plan. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, I don't know if it's a question. You might be wanting to make a motion, were you? That, or maybe both.
I thought a motion was already made, but if not, I'll make the motion that council confirm the parameters for the E-Town Hall budget meeting as outlined in the report. Then I have a question.
Okay, and seconded. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is great that we're trying to do something to bring some other people who may not be able to attend the meetings physically, but can attend possibly electronically. So it'll be interesting to see what occurs from that. I was just curious in regards to the channels for questions. It says Twitter using an assigned hashtag, Facebook using an assigned page, phone using an assigned number. Are any of those created at this point, or are they still in a working?
Everything has been created. There's a marketing effort that kicks off tomorrow to publicize the various elements that will be needed for the public to participate. And we'll be putting out news releases. We'll be using social media to promote it, obviously. And we've also have a deal in the works with Shaw Television to promote it as well, because they'll be broadcasting in addition to the other techniques.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
No, I was just going to wonder if we're going to have another rehearsal so Councillor Anderson could attend. Thanks.
Very cruel, very cruel. So there now is a motion on the floor. So the question, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Bestwick, opposed. Balance of councillor in favor. The motion passes. The 2012 surplus allocation purpose is to provide council with information on the allocation of the 2012 surplus, and the staff recommendation that council receive the report regarding the 2012 surplus allocation. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Just as it relates, curious as to at what point will we have a discussion on allocations of the funds specifically?
Through you, Your Worship, we are planning on bringing a report to Council next Monday night, which will talk about reserves, and at that point we have a specific recommendation on allocation of the surplus.
A week tonight, sort of.
A week tonight.
A week today, rather.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patchy. Oops, someone else go off too?
Maybe I'm premature, but is there any chance for you to talk a little bit about the possibilities that we might have to do things with this surplus that could result in a reduction in taxes?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Apache, the report that on the surplus has some discussion of two options that staff are putting forward specifically for council discussion. One of them is to use the approximately $2.5 million to fund any remediation efforts on the Chase Dam project. That would reduce the amount of external borrowing that we're required to do and would reduce taxes in 2014, as we would not then would reduce the amount of principal we'd have to pay in the future. So less borrowing, less paid back in the future. The other alternative we're putting forward to council is to reduce the internal borrowing on the annex, because we borrowed from our sewer funds. We're suggesting we could borrow less and pay that back sooner. We'll go over both of those options in much more detail next week when we're dealing with all of the reserves. Thank you.
Okay, so on that, motion has been made and moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're going into 2013 Grants Advisory Committee recommendation to be introduced by Grants Advisory Committee Acting Chair, Councillor Anderson.
I would just move the committee's recommendation, one, that council award another grant to the Nanaimo Volunteer and Information Center Society in the amount of $1,539.87 to cover the cost of the rentals at Bevan Park Auditorium on 2013, April 18th, for their 2013 annual volunteer appreciation luncheon. 2, a permissive tax exemption to the Columbian Care Society, and 3, cash in lieu of permissive tax exemption to the Columbian Care Society for 2013 taxes in the amount of $3,840 in estimated value.
The motion.
Moved? And did you move it, or you? Okay, and you seconded it then. Moved and seconded. I see no questions. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into minutes of the Grant Advisory Committee meeting held 2012, September 19. That's a while back. To be introduced by the Grants Advisory Committee Acting Chair, Councillor Anderson.
And I move that council receive the minutes of the Grants Advisory Committee meeting held September 19th, 2012. And I would just mention the reason being that you're receiving the minutes now is there wasn't any meetings for a period of time. As you know, the permissive tax exemptions cut off, I believe it's October 31st. So since then there was not a amount of people applying for permissive tax exemptions.
Okay, good clarification. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We've dealt with 10 already, and so 10A, I'm sorry, we've dealt with 10B, Subdivision Control Bylaw 1989, number 3260, proposed amendments to the Manual of Engineering Standards and Specifications, MOESS, and the purpose is to provide notice that the amendment to the Manual of Engineering Standards and Specifications is scheduled for presentation to Council as a bylaw amendment 2013, March 25. And the staff recommendation to Council receive the report regarding the proposed amendments to the manual.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second, moved and seconded. Councillor Kipp.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd like to actually defer this motion and slow this process down. I've sent off a situation where I've been reading and researching on our piping, our standards, and currently there's quite a few professional government articles, professional engineering groups that are talking about the effect on our infrastructure of climate change and global warming. I sent out a 6-page article. I tried today for about 3 times to send it through our system. It wouldn't. Finally, I think I sent it to Mr. Kenning a few minutes back at the beginning of the meeting. I would love to have a session with this on council and some of our development and review people. We did have this at a couple of meetings, but it is a really intense subject. For example, I see the use of butterfly valves versus gate valves. So pigging out lines become a problem with a butterfly versus a gate. Single backflows, non-testable single backflows, manholes now instead of standpipes, which would mean confined space rescue, which means more cost to the developer. Some of the product approval situations, have they gone through the rigorous process in that? So I don't know if anyone else is interested in it, but this is stuff to me. This is the future of our infrastructure. This is Councillor McKay went and some of the articles he talked about from his sustainability workshop that he attended in Windsor talked very dramatically about how global warming and the second factor of climate change is going to affect our infrastructure. And I'm not certain, when I looked over the reports and that, if that's entering into it. I mean, it's the future of our sustainability systems. So I would like to have a lunch and learn on how we're going from the old pipe system to the new piping and the new methods. And I would like to see if we could defer this to a lunch and learn session so council can have a better, and I'd like to invite to that some of the people from the Development Review Committee, because they have a knowledge of all this working systems.
I'll second the motion. Moved and seconded. A discussion on that?
I think staff wants to comment.
Just a comment that for the climate change, every time we look at the amendments, we do consider that type of information. Obviously, each individual item has some impact, so it's a very, you're right, it's an extensive type system. So the way the process is set out is it is actually an ongoing type process where as new developments come in place, new information, then the amendment can be made basically on an annual type basis. So right now, the amendments that are sort of in place here now would have thought about the existing information. If we get new information, have the discussions, then there's always the opportunity to introduce those amendments into future standards. So it's a case of right now that it might. I think it's a great idea to have some type of a session to talk about that and sort of go through how the climate change in particular, because one of the big ones will be the rainwater management type issues, which right now the plan is to do more of a comprehensive review for that specific issue, and those are the types of discussions that would come up as part of that. So I think with all the, there's a lot of amendments that are sort of in 2 years, so there's a lot of amendments that have been backed up, I guess, for lack of a better term. So I think that the amendments that are in the standards right now have considered that, and if we get new information and it makes sense to modify the standards again, that would be the result of any additional information. So it's just a comment that for the amendments as they're put forward now, if we can complete those, a lot of them are housekeeping, a lot of them are for other reasons than climate change or those types of issues, and if we go through that information, we can always revise the changes at a future date. So it's just a case of not throwing out all the amendments for that one issue, and what the best way is to deal with that issue might be to, we could possibly pull out a couple of the amendments that are related to that and put them forward to the next amendment round.
Well, if I can follow up, when you look at the date in the summary, I'm the only one that was around 1995, July, and instituted this program and helped back in 1995 when I was on council to push that the development community had a good insight into the development of our standards. And it's changed so dramatically. It's a living document. Those things have to change as they go and understand it. But like I say, and I appreciate the fact that staff is looking into the environmental issues of it. I do appreciate that, but I just like to see more of it. I'd like to see it be greener, less pipes, more swales, those type of things. And if we can pick out lines to make them easier without butterfly valves versus gate valves, and how our product approval fits into it, those type of things are important to me.
Yeah, and I think that all those are all possible as we go forward with talking about the different amendments and the different areas. In terms of the discussions, we do have the discussions with the developers, the contractors, engineers, the suppliers, and all that's part of that whole process. So I think in the case here, the question just being, because we have again, we did go through, as you mentioned, the Development Process Review Committee to try to address some of those issues. And I think that actually was quite successful. I think there was a lot of good discussion there, and we had some changes that were made. So at this point here, then, it's a question of if you're specifically interested in the sort of climate change aspect, I think that would be, the tie into that would be this more comprehensive review for stormwater, rainwater management, or any type of other equipment that maybe is influenced by that, but tie that together as an amendment that'll deal with all those issues sort of comprehensively, and not necessarily pull all the other issues that are in here with that. So trying to separate those would probably be the better sort of, or suggested approach.
Okay. There's three more speakers that wish to address this, but I'm just going to quickly ask staff, if this is deferred now, what does that have any kind of an implication on if this bylaw is delayed, the Manual of Engineering Standards? What impact does it have?
It basically would just then impact that the amendments or the application of the proposed amendments would be delayed by whatever timeline it took to complete that process.
Would that impact actual projects underway?
It would impact the implementation of any changes to the standards. So it would basically the project would continue on with the existing standards that are in place.
Okay. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Well, you know, I could support a motion like this and certainly give Councillor Kipp the time that he's asking for. But my worry is that, you know, when I went over this doing my homework the last 4 or 5 days, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that I don't understand. It's way too technical for me, and I have to totally rely on your advice. So my question then to you is, if we should have a lunch and learn about this particular subject, how can you make it so I can understand it?
I guess that would be part of how the information is presented at the lunch and learn. I think it could be made understandable, yes.
Okay.
Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a motion to receive a report, a report that's been in the making for some time. We have, I rely, and I would expect all of us to rely on the expert opinion of our professional staff. So I'm not going to support a motion to delay this any longer. I think that our staff are making this recommendation that these things be amended, and that we should have some respect for their professional expertise. And secondly, I'm absolutely convinced that our staff are as up to date as any other staff across the country, and I'm prepared to rely on their advice. Their advice is contained in this report. We're asked to receive the report, and I'd like to do that tonight and just show sort of proper respect for their professionalism.
Okay, Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have no qualms with the professionalism of the staff on this issue, and my reason for wanting to do this lunch and learn and to defer this is because there may be items in it that we may not after learning more agree with. There are items in it that we don't understand. We're being asked to receive a report and endorse it on a subject matter that, as Councillor Patchy has suggested, is difficult to understand. If we could just get a little bit more of a grasp on it, I'd be more comfortable with moving ahead.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, I agree with Councillor Brennan that I've confirmed with the professional staff, our professional staff, but I've also gone out and talked to a lot of professionals in the community that are in that business, engineers, suppliers, people that put it in. And these are the standards for our subdivision. These are the curbings. This is everything we do. And things are changing dynamically with our water recharging systems and that. And everyone here admits that they're not capable, I guess, of understanding this or something. Or I don't believe I'm that way. I look into it. I kind of understand it. It's stuff I've done for a long time. I see some concerns, and I just wanted to voice those. And if you disagree with me, fine. I'm just voicing my opinion. That's fact.
Okay. Are you reaching for that button, or what are you doing here? I can
I'm
see
just going to say I'm prepared to receive the report, and I like Councillor Kipp's suggestion of a lunch and learn. Maybe we'll all learn something. I think it's important to understand the reports that we're receiving, so I think it would be a good exercise.
Okay, so the motion that we're dealing with now is to
defer receipt of the report until after an information session for council, such as a lunch and learn.
at a date yet not determined, or when do we?
We'd look up the earliest convenience for council.
So the motion is to defer, and all those in favor? Opposed? I have myself, Councillor Brennan, and Councillor Greaves opposed, balance of councillor in favor, so the deferral is confirmed. Bylaws with no accompanying report. Motion that the highway closure and dedication removal, a portion of Gulfview Drive adjacent to 3852 and 3887 Gulfview Drive, bylaw 2012 number 7156, to provide for highway closure and dedication removal in exchange for lands required for highway be adopted. Anyone like to move that? Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaw status sheet, nothing there, and we're going into correspondence. If somebody would like to move receipt of the correspondence.
So moved.
And seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Any business arising? Anyone have any questions dealing with either A, B, C, or D? Hearing none. Sorry. Hearing none, we'll move into now other business, and I think we have Councillor Johnson and Councillor McKay, and we also have a delegation from Mr. Carter. So what is your pleasure? Oh, we have two from Councillor McKay.
Carter's first.
Okay, I'm just going to write this one down. So, Mr. Carter, welcome, sir. Now, yep, sorry.
Your Worship, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the Council, thank you for making time for me this evening on this important issue. That's better. I'm Bill Carter. With my wife, I run Bastion Jewelers downtown on Commercial Street, have for 28 years. I do hope to be there for a little longer. On March 4th, we had a town hall style meeting. Over 200 citizens elected to have me attend this meeting and speak with you about selling the public marina without consultation or forethought. We know this is true because no mention of this sale was in the 5-year plan with the Nanaimo Port Authority. And tonight I'll be asking Council to consider a motion to recall its appointed MPA director for cause. Alternatively, a motion to ask Mr. Unger to fulfill his obligation to the community and demand the resignation of Nanaimo Port Authority CEO Bernie Dumas. I think there's sufficient evidence of gross mismanagement across the spectrum of his management duties. And I'd like to bring 2 documents to your attention, please. It's the first one is, the headline is Charter, the guide to the relationship between the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Port Authority. And it's a pretty standard document. I'd like to go right down to the bottom line. Ensuring effective public consultation on significant decisions relating to port and adjacent lands in the city. And the second document I'd like to bring to your attention is, this is called a special examination. This is something that is due and under the Marine Act, and the authority is required by the Canada Marine Act to maintain these systems and practices in such a manner as will provide reasonable assurance that, number 1, the authority's assets are safeguarded and controlled, the transactions of the authority are in accordance with the Canada Marine Act, and the letters patent, when applicable, the bylaws of the authority, And number 3 is the financial, human, and physical resources of the authority were managed economically, efficiently, and that its operations were carried out effectively. And I think we can all agree that this did not happen with the marina, and really it hasn't happened in a number of the duties. I know that you don't really like it when we refer to newspaper articles, but I do want to point out that our MLA, Ron Cantillon, is quoted as saying that he hopes for an amicable and reasonable outcome for everybody in this issue. And I think we really all looking for a reasonable outcome. One way to initiate a reasonable outcome is just to ask for the resignation of Bernie Dumas. I think he's been disastrous in his role. And although the Nanaimo Port Authority directors have some responsibility for the community, for the public relations mess about the marina and other issues across the harbor, the role of Mr. Dumas has been and continues to be a disaster for the MPA and the community. I believe he's personally accountable for many of the present problems facing the Nanaimo Port Authority. His departure could set its stage for...
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I'm sorry. You're crucifying someone here that's not defending himself, and they're just your words, and gee whiz.
Thank you.
It's awkward for us to do.
Very awkward.
I mean, he doesn't work for us, obviously, and
Very good.
It's a challenge.
And thank you for that, Councillor. I will move on. I'm not sure if the term "pay it forward" was in use back in the 70s. And that was when Gino Sonola, any of you know Gino?
Sure.
Late councillor. When he fought and won a very hard battle to keep the public marina in public hands, okay? So we never thought we'd have to fight this battle again. We thought it was a done thing, that we would always keep this public asset for all future generations. And we'd have it if we had known it was for sale. But it was sold in secret by the very people we entrusted to keep it and manage it for us. The stewards of this public asset sold it without any form of consultation. This is an outrage. It's an established fact, excuse me, that a revenue stream of tens of millions of dollars enter our local economy through this downtown facility each year. That's just established. We know this. This known revenue stream is one that local businesses have come to count on. I draw on it, we draw on it every day. The revitalization of the downtown core, which I've been involved in, is much more than responsible and well-planned development. Things such as painting, fixing up old buildings, putting out flowers, and hosting community events. It's about revitalizing the economy of the area. That is the goal here, is it not, Your Worship? Thank you. The current MPA plan is to divert the existing revenue stream and replace it with a new one, we could presume. However, after meeting with the Nanaimo Economic Development Corporation, I learned that the numbers for this project, the data does not exist according to the CEO, Sasha Angus. And how can removing an existing revenue stream to the downtown qualify as revitalization? Is a question I'd like to pose to you, councillors. I think it's so it is late, and I'm going to just try to cut it short as I can. And I do appreciate it. Thank you. For over 150 years, Nanaimo has had a working harbor. and the city and its downtown core was built around this economic base. The boat basin, government wharfs are a publicly owned part of the harbor, a place where commercial fishing, towing, Protection Island resident commuters, and transient boaters land for day-to-day business within the city. And meaningful consultation with the community has not and will not happen in this NPA scheme. Which will see a public asset become private property. We are now publicly aware that this memorandum of understanding regarding this sale was agreed upon behind closed doors. A secret meeting, a deal done in the dark, where even yourself, distinguished mayor and council, were not made aware of this sale, this lease. This lease is a sale in every way. This lease is a sale just as the newly created parking slips are intended to be sold, and they are going to be sold. Mr. Dumas offered the first slip sales himself, acting as agent, I guess, for the proponent. Ladies and gentlemen, the time for consultation with the city and its stakeholders is before a sale or a memorandum of understanding is come to here. It's outrageous that due process has not been served. We're not a city that can afford to lose our public marina. In the city of Nanaimo's recent strategic plan, its citizens identified public access to the waterfront as their number one priority. I believe that the Nanaimo Port Authority directors may have overstepped their own authority in this matter. And I'm calling on you to take the responsibility and calling it challenge to you, just as I did the other night at that meeting, that town hall meeting. And I'd like to see you recall your appointed board member. And the second thing I'd like you to do is to send letters to the Ministry of Transport informing them that the Nanaimo Board has lost the public's confidence to manage this public asset. Demand a special investigation before this sale. That's one of the tools at your disposal. We're all adults. And I suspect that this sale is just to cover a deficit that he's run up, that the Port Authority has run up. So it's late, and I thank you again. I'm not going to go into the causes for director dismissal as I did the other night. If any of you want a copy of them, there's plenty of examples where they've overstepped their boundaries, completely ignored the Canada Marine Act. Is it law? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But I can tell you one thing that has happened here is I really believe that the Nanaimo people have been treated in a really, really poor way in this matter. They have not been consulted with. The community has not been consulted with in a proper and upstanding manner. And I hope I can come back to you in a couple of weeks and we can talk about it a little bit further. And I want to thank you again. It's late. I'm tired. We're all tired. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you. We certainly will look into this thing and find out just exactly what legal rights we as a city have in this matter. And when you're back, we will have another opportunity to exchange ideas on this.
Thank you very much.
Sir.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Now, we have a couple of announcements. Councillor Diana Johnstone has something that you'd
It's
like
just
to...
very briefly, Your Worship. I just want to advise the citizens and those of staff that weren't aware that we just, in Council, we recently, this past week, hosted the British Columbia Masters Curling Championship. And I would just like to extend to the volunteers of the committee that put on this event and our city park staff who were responsible for putting the bid process together our sincere congratulations. Members of the curlers that came from all parts of the province said that it was by far the best provincial championship they have ever attended, and they were treated like royalty. So I just want to say, job well done to all the organizing committee.
Well said, and we are very proud of the Parks, Recreation and Culture. We have an eminent chair that's operated and two very capable members of the council, but we do have a first-class staff, and I did attend the opening and heard a lot of very complimentary comments from those attending. And actually, they had some of the curlers at the opening one. They had under 60 and under 70, but then there was 4 people that were about 90, and they were surprisingly good. It's something, I guess it's a sport you can participate in for as long as you can stand, I guess. So well done. So now we have a couple of comments from, announcements from Councillor McKay. Councillor McKay?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 2 items. One is to update you and the public on the recent opinion I received concerning conflict of interest. The report came back from legal counsel looking at 4 specific areas. They included 1, specific instances which would or would not constitute a conflict with respect to my employment. 2, guidance on how I may or may not have an involvement in regulation guidance concerning signs in Nanaimo. 3, general guidance with respect to friendships and my role on council pertaining to same. And 4, overall guidance with respect to social obligations that normally accompany the responsibilities of office. And I wish to thank council for the ability to get this clarification by way of the resolution we made last year concerning the funding of such legal opinions. Thank you. The second one is on Saturday night, I was fortunate to attend as a representative in Courtenay the 20 under 40 awards ceremony. There were over 320 guests at the Philberg Centre. There were 150 nominations for the brightest 20 under 4 for the brightest minds and entrepreneurs on Vancouver Island. There was the gender representation was that of the top 100, 47 of them were women, very bright women, and. I just wanted to recap just a half dozen folks in the Nanaimo region that were winners. Tyler Heisterman, president of Cinnabar Valley Farms, took his small business from 10 years ago to from 10 employees to 40. And increased annual sales from $400,000 a year to $5.5 million annually. Levi Sampson, president of Harmac and Czech TV, was also one of the winners. There was also Mike Delves, who is CGA in Nanaimo, who just made it under the wire. He turns 40 this week. He is a CGA with MNP and a chair of the chamber. Ken Pauls, which is the controller of Fairwinds Resort. James McIntyre, president of PI Granite and Studio Kitchens. Katrina Elliott, president of Elite Image Software Corporation. And Andre Sullivan, owner of the Integral Wealth Securities and also the co-chair of the NEDC. There were a couple of honorable mentions I thought I should bring up. Well, a couple of them are Daughters of Nanaimo, which include Michelle McKinnon. She's now the manager of the BMO, the main branch on Vancouver Island, the largest branch on Vancouver Island. in Victoria. She was raised in Nanaimo. And the adopted daughter of Nanaimo, who received, particularly for her community involvement, none other than Myra Lawrence of CTV Vancouver Island. While she lives and works out of Victoria, I think we consider her to be one of our adopted daughters. It was a wonderful event. Just a side note, Levi Sampson, who attended both the 40 under 40 in Vancouver and the 20 under 40 on Vancouver Island, thought that this was a better event than what was held in Vancouver, and it was a wonderful occasion.
Oh, thanks for the update on that. We actually have only one member council would actually be considered in that category, and I won't go there. Anyway.
I'm not that special, John.
Au contraire. Okay, well, I know a lot of people would have voted for you had you been considered in that category. So we now move into the question period.
Fred Taylor. Did I hear senior staff, when you're dealing with 20 Barsby Avenue, mention that it's for sale?
I believe the indication was that it was listed for sale. Is that not correct?
Would council not form an opinion that upselling the property anywhere in the city may deter development for somebody coming in and wanting to buy it and create a development when the land itself becomes very expensive? In other words, I think it's one of the factors in creating development. If you can get money out of the timber on the land, buy it as raw land without extremely high value. Because look at this example. It's been there, many years, sitting vacant with proposals to get you to agree to just help increase its value for sale.
Well, I think that might be an indirect result, but I don't know if that was the intention. Any comment from staff? Maybe not.
And my next question is, I heard Councillor Anderson, when taking on number 8B, surprised at the length of what he had to discuss to the council about 8B, and it makes me wonder if he reads the agenda before the meeting, when he was surprised at the amount of information he had to discuss to council before.
I think just an observation.
I would be fine with commenting. That's development permit number DP80.
But you were quite surprised when you turned the page. There was so much information to read out, and that led me to think he hasn't read it.
No, the point of the matter was the staff recommendation. It goes to the bottom of the page.
And my next question would be, in hearing Councillor Padgey about a fence on city property, is that remain, or does that?
My understanding is the delegation said they would.
Said he would remove it.
Yeah.
Because I'm concerned of other fences that are left to remain because they're on city property and say on corners and that are conditioned to visibility of traffic, yet they're left because they're on city property. And my last question, please, in following fish protection and all this sort of stuff and stream protection of years gone by, I was the understanding if the municipal bylaw setback is greater than it rules, unless you want to use the province and procedure, as I've seen tonight, to reduce your bylaw demand. But you can go, and there's a lot of case law, in my opinion, where bylaws stand. And that's the understanding I was given. And even when this was all entertained before, there was provincial representatives, federal representatives, everybody. And this item was discussed that the municipal bylaw stands unless you want to use the provincial government and experts as an avenue of reducing your bylaw demand.
Okay, interesting point.
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. I'm sorry to keep you, but I have what I think may be a very interesting question. When you passed development permit DP 803 8B, the last item here that was approved was the maximum height of a retaining wall is 1.8 meters. The proposed retaining wall, north property line, has a height of 3.4 meters, a proposed height variance of 1.2 meters. That doesn't add up to me.
Your Worship, it should say 1.6 meters. It's a typo error. He's correct.
Oh, good catch.
My question relates to if that hadn't been caught, is that a legal bylaw containing that error before it's fixed?
Good question, yeah. Mr. Kenny, does anyone on staff want to?
Well, what we're reading isn't the bylaw, but I believe the bylaw is correct. This is the listing of the variances, and unfortunately the math was wrong. I'm glad that Ron has pointed it out and it's duly
But I think the question is, would it change anything?
Would it vacate the bylaw until that correction is made? No?
I don't know that, but the correction has been made.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Motion to adjourn? Yes. Seconder? We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Caught on and start doing